project and I'll do it.
Sure.
Or I can give you a board and you can record it to the TV and good to go.
So AirTeam's an application
Yeah.
that broadcasts to the,
Oh,
so you now,
I see.
you don't have any wires or anything, you just do.
Well, I'll try Air Team. I mean,
Um,
or whatever's easier for you. It makes no difference to me. A cord's fine, whatever you
Yeah.
think is best.
Sometimes it's just easier for
What-
the presenter
Yeah, no, that's fine.
knows where the cord is.
I haven't listened to this school before. I was
This is
thinking
our
about
little,
all the
humble
schools I've seen in
office, but-
Vermont. This is not one of them.
we are on the edge of the whole campus, so that's our middle school, our high school, the Hartford Technology Center.
Is over there.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're,
hockey rink, a swimming pool.
oh, everything's kind of on one
Big,
campus.
yeah.
That's nice. And then do you have elementary schools? as
Three
well?
elementary schools,
Three from different towns or
well, villages within the town.
villages within?
Yeah, so we're a single unified school district, we're not.
You're not unified.
We're a single district, we're not having any other representation, so we don't have 97 different boards all reporting up to a single board kind of thing, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the job.
I know, I know,
I look at those boards and my
I know.
head goes off, I don't know how you do it.
Well, we have a supervisory union, but we're
Yeah.
just two districts, so it
Okay.
doesn't feel bad.
Yeah.
We're very good, like we like each other a
Oh,
lot. so.
that helps. I have a friend who was involved in an attempt to create one when they were forced to
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the,
Got it, sorry.
got it? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the school board meeting for Hartford Board of School Directors for Hartford, Vermont, and it's May the 8th, 2024. So any changes, additions, and approval of the agenda?
Just for the business, the governance process at 8 o'clock, can we add the financial controls checklist? Jacob is gonna jump on, yeah. Do that piece.
Super.
Other than that,
Any other changes or additions?
well, the board might wanna consider having public comment first when they do the governance process and then give it, just because the students are coming, that's just a
Okay,
courtesy.
what time are they coming?
They should be here at a little after 8.
Oh, okay, so we'll do it in between.
Yeah,
Okay, sure.
that's what time I told them. I said you might consider that just so they can get home and do their homework or go to bed or whatever they do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do I have a motion?
A motion that we accept the agenda with the change just noted.
Second? All approved? Aye,
Aye.
no no's. Okay. Then we should go straight into board training.
Mm-hmm.
Who's doing that?
I don't know. Some lady.
Yeah. We have, Debbie Singerser here from Vermont School Boards Association to do training on policy governance, and, we're in a unique place with policy governance. Some of us have been doing it for a long time, and some of us it's brand new to. So
That's what I wanted.
we met and I tried to explain that and didn't exactly know where to start, but she's gonna do her best to sort of navigate between very new novice policy governors and Peter and I have been doing it for 12 years.
And that is
Oh,
the
we've been doing it for 8, so.
Yeah.
He's 8.
Wow, well, that's still a long time,
Yeah, it's been a
actually.
long time.
What was the year that you adopted policy governance on the board? Do you
I
remember?
think it was about 2008, 9, it was prior to me.
Yeah, prior to us joining, so the board, prior to any of us, I think Coach may have been there.
Yeah, coach was on.
So, they adopted it and I'm glad they did. In my opinion, it's probably the best legacy anybody has ever left. So,
Peter, did you guys have training? Like when you adopted it as
Uh,
a system, did you have some sort of formal training?
so I don't know how it was done prior to my joining the
Yeah.
board. I did a lot of reading up on it once I was on the board. And there was a lot of stuff available through, the School Boards Association back then.
That's valid.
And, there were other materials that I could find, so I read up on it a lot.
Yeah.
And over the years, we have continued to have school board annual trainings.
Great.
We don't do this every single time, but we have done it with some great regularity to introduce new members of the board to the concept and how it works, and to reaffirm for those of us who've been doing it for a while what it really means.
Yeah.
And occasionally is an attempt to bring the recalcitrant members into line with everybody else.
The doubters. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part is the idea of unity of the board, and say everything you want about it until the decision is made, but once the decision is made, you are behind the decision, is not the way some people work. They can't give up the fight ever, and that has caused problems on occasion.
Yeah, and that board holism is one of the 10
Yeah.
principles of policy governance, which we'll review those 10 principles tonight. And actually, I would say that principle is a principle of good governance in general. It's not just particular to policy governance, but it's the way boards should operate with one voice. So we'll get into that. let me introduce myself very quickly, and then I do want to go around and have you all introduce yourselves. I do want to get to know a little bit more about who you are, your experience and comfort level with policy governance, and also who you are when you're not in this room. I always find that part of people's stories even more interesting than being a school board member. So I'm Debbie Singizer, and I'm from the School Boards Association. This is my board experience. I actually started off in an international school in Kathmandu, Nepal. It was a pre-K through 12 school, and I was elected to that board for 2 years. It looks nothing like anything here in Vermont. And I came to Vermont in 2011 and was elected to the Barstow Unified Union School District Board, which looks just like you all. We're a 5-person board. We're policy governance. And so I feel really comfortable in this space with all of you. We are part of a unified or supervisory union. We're part of the Rutland Northeast Supervisory Union. We're in a side-by-side with Otter Valley School District. So, and we consolidated under Act 46. Barstow is a unified union school district, but we consolidated 2 different towns under Act 46. So the Mendon and Chittenden came together, and now we're Barstow in a side-by-side with Otter Valley at Rutland Northeast. And I was chair for about, I can't remember, 4 or 5 of my 6 years, I guess. Then in 21, it was the end of my second term, and I decided to get off. And I, hindsight's 2020, right? This year came around and there was a vacant seat, and I felt compelled to run because it was nobody running for it. And I said, well, I want somebody duly elected to the seat. I don't want to see an appointment to the seat. So I ran as a write-in candidate and won. Same election, that was town meeting day that our budget was defeated.
Oh.
And then at our special meeting to discuss the revisions to the budget, they elected me chair. So now I'm chair of the district board. Which I love doing, but it's just, I'm in, uncharted territory. We've never even came close to a budget failure, and now we've had 2.
Oh, geez.
So I know,
This year?
yeah. So we still don't have a approved budget, and our superintendent is leaving at the end of this fiscal year, and we don't have another one. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun over there at Barstow. But it'll all be good. It's all gonna be fine. I know it will be. So I'm back on the board, and really quickly, these are the things that I do at the VSBA. I do a lot of board training, like what I'm doing with you all today. I work a lot on our annual conference. I don't know if you've ever been. I know Nancy has been.
We've all,
Tom, have you been here?
oh, yeah, many times.
A
Yeah,
couple of years ago, our entire board went.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I think they
Usually
should-
we're pretty good.
They should
At
give
least
an
4.
award for those boards that go. Everybody goes, I think there should be an award. So, yeah,
We
so
enjoy it.
a lot of good stuff happening with the conference this year, which you'll be hearing more about. I do monthly webinars that are recorded, and then they're all kept on the VSBA website on different topics. So even if you can't attend live, and there's something that you feel like you need to kind of beef up your knowledge about, you can just go into the webinar archive and find pretty much any topic. It's pretty extensive. And then I do, because of my policy governance experience and my own training, I do consult with policy governance boards, do trainings to the best of my ability, but I have to tell you, I'm not certified. I don't have like a credential from the Carver Institute or anything like that. But I've really had an amazing time learning by doing, and I still have a policy governance coach who I call quite a bit for advice. And so I'm a student, just like you. Policy governance, I feel like you never really master it completely. You're always learning something new. And we'll talk about how you can learn about it. I think it's really helpful when you do policy governance to read about it as best as you can, take online classes and, but I think where the rubber hits the road and where the real learning happens is at the meeting, right? It's putting into practice, and also, practicing it in meetings. And that's something else I'd like to talk to you about is at our board, we do a scenario at every board meeting, just a, what if this happens? How would you handle this as a policy governance board? And it takes 10 or 15 minutes out of the board meeting. And what I found is that if we do it faithfully and we really try to protect that on our agenda. In fact, we try so hard to put it at the top of the agenda so it doesn't get kicked off because of time. I have found that over time, the board becomes better equipped to handle those problems that arise because chances are we had a scenario where we had already discussed the what ifs. What if this had happened? How would we have handled this? So I find that professional continual learning is really, really important to a policy governance board. So that's me in a nutshell. And I wanted to ask you, yes, basically, I've met all of you individually, but who are you outside of this room? What do you do for fun or for your job? And tell me about your knowledge and familiarity with policy governance. And I know, Garrett, you're brand new,
I'm brand
right?
new, so I'm pretty easy. My experience with policy governance is pretty much zero at this point. So,
Okay,
so I have a lot to learn.
great.
And I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I'm a lifetime student anyway.
A
So,
lifetime learner.
yes. So I guess I'll go first.
Were you just elected? Just, yeah,
Yes, so what, in February? So I've been on the board for a couple months now.
okay.
Before this, the only board I'd ever served on was for a farmer's market.
Yeah.
So it's much less involved. But fun. You know. So outside of here, so I'm an IT director and also a personal trainer at the Upper Valley Aquatic Center, which is a.
Oh, you are.
local
I love that
fitness
center.
and
Yeah, that's where the swim state meets take place.
Yes.
Love
so,
it.
So I play a big role whenever there's a swim meet, like an all hands on deck scenario.
Yeah.
I've been here for about 14 years and I've just never said no to anything. My degree is in data analytics and web design.
Uh-huh.
Even though I kind of started there in the fitness realm, I noticed there was a need for kind of IT and technical support and all those things. So I ended up being dubbed the IT guy and then went back to school for IT specifically. And then for fun, I have 2 kids. So whatever they want to do for fun is pretty much what I do.
What you do for fun.
They're 4 and 6. And that was my big motivation for running for the board.
Mhm.
So just starting their school careers.
Mhm.
That and I grew up in this town
Mhm.
and I attended K through 12 at Hartford.
You did. So did you ever leave and come back? Or?
Yes, I mean, I went to school in first in Newton, Mass, and then in Northern Vermont at Linden State,
Yeah.
kind of fresh out of high school. But my wife and I talked, she's from Northern Vermont, and we just decided that we like it here, so we
Yeah.
stay.
Right.
Yep, and I've been a homeowner here for about a decade,
Mhm.
so everything we do here directly impacts me
Mhm.
in more ways than one.
Mhm. For sure.
So yes, I'm looking forward to learning more.
Excellent. Good. Thank you for sharing. Miss Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy. I've been on the school board for 8 years, and for the most part, I've loved every minute of it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it gets a little stressful, but we always get over that little hump and keep going on. I serve on the board of directors for Hartford Community Coalition
Oh,
here
yeah.
in Hartford. What else do I do?
You're on the VSBA.
Yeah.
I'm on the VSBA
Rotary.
board, actually, pardon me?
Rotary.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
past district governor for our local Rotary district. Still work with Rotary, do a lot of things with that. Do a lot of volunteer work in the community. I have, 3 granddaughters, 2 of which have already come through this school
Mhm.
system.
Wow.
I have a daughter who works for the school system. I have a granddaughter who works for the school system. And then 1 more to graduate, 2 more years. And, I have 2 grown grandsons. I'm very involved in the community. I love doing the work. I love working with the kids and working for the kids too.
Mhm.
I volunteer in the summertime for the summer program here at the school. And we do a lot of work with that,
Mhm.
raise money for food,
Great.
disperse food out.
We need more volunteers like you, Nancy, in this world. I do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Doug.
Hi. Well, let's see, I started out as a volunteer for the school when we had decided that we were going to construct the Wilder Grammar School.
Ah,
And I followed that through and found that it was interesting.
yeah,
And an opening was on the board. And so I filled it. And then when that came up, I ran for reelection. And here I am. My background, I retired from Dartmouth, Hitchcock, after 47 years in hospital administration.
wow,
And my forte was, I was the director of the operating room.
you were, wow.
And had a staff of about 250 people. It went up and down a little bit, but right around there. I organized surgical directors in the state of Vermont and New Hampshire.
Mhm.
And we learned a lot about each, almost like this, a lot about each other and what we could do to help each other.
Mhm.
What else?
You served our country in the army. You served our country in the army during Vietnam.
Yeah,
Oh, well, thank you.
I don't,
And I understand, that is important.
um,
How
and
long
on
have
the
you
private
done
side, I had a daughter and a son.
Yeah,
My daughter is a para at the Votex Center
uh-huh,
this year. My son, bless him, he is the principal of the Wiley Grammar School.
uh-huh.
So both, obviously, both of them went through the system here from grades one right straight through till they graduated. So did I.
Mhm.
And on the side of a private life, not only did I run the operating rooms, but I bred and showed Morgan horses for close to 50 years.
Wow,
And if that wasn't enough, I also was a professional dog handler for 15 and showed Springer Spaniels, Irish setters, mostly sporting dogs.
that's fascinating.
So
I'm gonna ask a boring question after all that. How many years have you been serving on this school board?
it's
Two.
two
Two, so you're
plus,
The time he worked on the,
Volunteer time.
plus the volunteer time that you did, okay. Okay.
Well, when you fill the position for
And
it.
so when you joined the board, Doug, did you get some policy governance training or was it self-taught? Yeah, okay, okay, so
And-
learning
and-
through
and one
osmosis kind of.
not that it had titles to it, but managing 250 nurses.
Yeah.
And dealing with 140 something surgeons who all think they were the most important person in the world. It's, I need, I want, and therefore I should get a lot of this, what you call policy governance. We practice, and it was the same, which is put everything on the table. Everybody has input.
Mhm.
We make decisions, and once we've made the decision, you support it. You don't
Mhm.
sit there and go blah, 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 and try to change it.
You don't question it, yeah.
And most of the time it worked. Occasionally
Mhm.
didn't.
Mhm.
But I had a theory as a manager.
Mhm.
I thought the world of the rebel rousers. I had some staff, but you need the background. My predecessor had been fired. Hitchcock went through 4 years of trying to find another OR director.
Mhm.
They could not find anybody that would suit the nurses, the doctors, the anesthesiologists, or what have you. I was running the cardiology and cardiopulmonary lab, and life was rosy. And my boss came and said, "Wouldn't you like a challenge?" And from there, and I was on my way to go back to school to get my master's. And it was, I'd gone through the interview process. when they put this on me. And so I said, well, I'll do it for a year or two. And as much as it was difficult politically and whatever,
Mhm.
it was fun in one sense. And therefore, I like the rebel rousers
Mhm.
because my first staff meeting, two of them looked me straight in the eye and said, don't get comfortable. We got the last one fired, we can get you fired too.
Oh, nice.
That was my greeting to surgery.
Welcome.
Great.
And so it, yeah,
That's amazing. Well, my dad was just came out of heart surgery over at Dartmouth today. So I trust that hospital very much with his life. and He did fine. So I wonder if he was in your OR room. That'd be kind of interesting.
well, see, when I started, we had 8, believe it or not.
Wow.
And that was on Maynard Street.
Mhm.
And when I left, we had 26.
Wow.
And they broke ground for the freestanding surgery center.
Wow. It's amazing.
So
Good stories.
it was constant growth
It is.
and you learned,
Yeah, you guys are lucky
Every
to be
step of the
so
way.
close to Dartmouth where you
Yeah.
are right here. Yeah, it's a little bit of a schlep for us, but it's a good hospital.
and I will add that at the end of my tenure, and as I was winding down at Hitchcock, I had 3 small hospitals in New Hampshire approach me, just asking if I couldn't help them. And so I actually started Everside Surgical Consulting and ran a consulting company for 3 years.
Wow.
And found out that it was very lucrative.
Why wasn't I doing this all along?
And I was happy because I was able to, once I could not shed Dartmouth. You know, I went to these places saying, I'm not here as Hitchcock, I'm here on my own. Your board asked me to come and review certain issues. I will give you suggestions whether you follow through or not. That's your choice. But they were all paranoid that I was there to look and we were gonna swallow them up. Actually,
Wow.
one of them is now part of the community.
Cause we are swallowing them all up, yeah.
So anyways,
Oh, gosh.
that's a
Good story.
snapshot
I'd
of-
love to have dinner with you sometime. We could talk and hear all your stories. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Peter, what's your story?
Um, so I was born in New Haven, Connecticut.
Uh-huh.
My father was there getting his PhD at Yale.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was the son of 2 professors, which meant we did a lot of moving until my father ultimately got tenure. So I grew up in lots of places. The place I identified most with is Texas. I like Nancy, but the one constant in my life was the fact that my grandfather, who was a lawyer in Boston, had bought a place in Pomfret in 1949. And I spent most of my summers growing up back here in Vermont. And so Vermont sort of captured my attention, my heart, whatever. It's one of the 2 places I would happily live if I got to choose where I was living, and I worked it so I could live here. And I'm 4th generation, at least, of lawyers in my family. And so, of course, having finished law school and done the lawyer thing, I ended up in IT. Worked at Dartmouth Hitchcock for what's going on about 27 years now, I think. 25 officially, because I came in through the back door and didn't count originally. Had various roles within Dartmouth over the years. Set up and ran the cybersecurity program for, oh God, better part of 15 years. Now I'm in charge of all the telephones.
Wow.
and all that. So that's what I do.
Yeah, and you've
Yeah.
been here on the board, you said for how long? For about,
12 or so
12
years, yeah. My daughter was in beginning first grade when I started.
okay. Great.
She is now in college,
Wow.
or she would be if she wasn't having health issues. Yes,
We'll be back.
she will be back.
That's right.
So I've always sort of thought that one should do what one can to help the community.
Mhm.
I have lived in areas in which communities gave up on their schools, and I saw what happened to the communities as a result of those kinds of efforts.
Mhm.
It feels good to not be paying the school taxes and everything. But when your community then starts to no longer have people wanting to move in and everything else, doesn't feel quite so good. So I've been doing what I could to help around the edges.
Mhm. Good for you. Thank you for doing that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Tom, what's your story? I don't know where you're from originally.
Jeez.
Are you not Vermonter, are you?
That story.
You haven't been a superintendent in Hartford for your whole life? No.
I grew up in Rhode Island,
Mhm.
and after college wanted to move up north to get some land and sort of, have a little more room to have a family, so in 1990, we moved to Canaan, New Hampshire. And I worked at Mascoma Schools just over the border
Oh,
for
yeah.
10 years,
Mhm.
eventually being the director of special ed.
Mhm.
Then I left there in 2000, went to Woodstock and Windsor Central Supervisory Union, was the director of instructional support there for 11 years. And then I came here in 2011 and I've been here.
As superintendent? you
Yeah.
can- Wow. Oh, so you've been
13
superintendent a
years.
long time.
And I've already told everyone I'm retiring next year, so this next year will be my last year.
Mhm.
Done an amazing job of turning around the district, which had many problems when he took over,
Mhm.
including the fact that we had not had a clean audit for a very long time.
Wow.
And we have now had something like 10 successive audits with
And a whole
no
bunch of-
issues at all.
That's great.
Bunch of issues, and
Yeah.
but things have changed a lot.
Yeah, they sure
Yeah.
have. They sure have.
Yeah, our budget has probably doubled
Mhm.
13 years.
And you guys passed, right? You passed your
We
budget?
passed our budget, we rescinded it,
Mhm. Oh,
passed
that's
it.
right.
so we passed it on the first try technically.
Mhm.
And we also passed the bond,
Oh, yeah,
The
you did tell me
$21
that.
million
That's impressive.
bond.
That's great.
Very hard fund.
kind of a nice way to, that'll be my last.
That'll be your nice way to go out. Yeah. That's great. It's so good did you know that about each other before you went around? Did you ever have occasion to talk about like your lives outside of the board meeting, or is it very transactional? Like you get in, you come, then you go home?
We do a little bit of
Yeah.
socializing, but not.
I just learned a lot about everybody. I mean, I knew bits and pieces.
Bits
but-
and pieces,
but,
yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we got to
Learning
learn more about him because
I know. I
I
noticed
never had a
that.
chance to.
Yeah, I just noticed that our board meetings are so packed and we're like
Yes.
hurrying to get started, and as soon as it ends, everybody wants to go home. And sometimes I feel like I wanna know, like, what do you do when you're not here, you know, and because I'm not part of the school anymore, my kids are gone, so I don't know the board members that are the parents as well, so, yeah, I think it's a good idea to kind of figure out who we are. So let's do policy governance. There's a lot to do, so I'm not sure how much we're gonna get through.
May I suggest we grab food quickly
Of
before we
course,
carve in that we can all.
yeah, no, do-
Nine.
no, go ahead, go right ahead.
Yeah, the ham and provolone has hot peppers and no tomatoes.
I'm just gonna grab a copy of my card too.
To satisfy some folks who like that.
And are you responsible for the brownies?
No, Sherry brought.
Oh,
them.
Sherry brought them, okay.
Should have known.
Either way, they're gonna be good.
Yes, they really.
Aw,
I think there's more than enough, so.
oh my gosh, where you got from Jersey Mike's?
Jersey Mike's because they're new in town
They are.
and they're good, pretty good and it's easy.
Love subs.
Well, it's really easy because you can order online. That's the issue for me, is that I try to be here. Probably need to coordinate that. not ask someone to stay late.
You guys aren't that far from the town, are you? I mean, where's Hartford's town center?
Hartford, yeah, White River Junction.
Oh, yeah,
just
White River
down
Junction.
here.
I drove over the
This is
river.
West
Yeah, yeah.
Lebanon.
This is West Love.
This, let me want to.
Okay.
Hmm.
Of course, it's not like the meal I'm missing.
What did they order?
I don't know.
I
They
got a
broke early to
variety.
go.
It's a variety of sandwiches and there should be more than enough for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Couple.
I'll
Do
grab
that
one for the road, Tom, when
Yeah.
I leave. Actually, that makes my drive, help me stay awake a little bit too.
This is ham and provolone with tomatoes, as far as I can see, no.
really? They didn't.
I think they. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. Oh, be happy.
I tried, I did try.
You did try. Give you credit,
Garrett, I'm gonna,
get a
Suggest-
participation award.
do you have a little budget? You could buy a book, this book
Yeah.
for your board members. Garrett would be, I think, for me, I've seen a lot of resources on policy governance. I've read the Carver's books, and I think this one is by far the best. It's
And I
so,
did get him one.
it's so colloquial and easy to understand. Did you?
Garrett, didn't I give you one from policy governance about this?
Here, I'll let you look
This
at
is a
it.
big, it's not the same one, but
This
it's
is
one. we
Carolyn
got in one of our
Oliver,
trainings.
who was a student of the Carvers, and they
Right.
approved that, I mean, whatever, you can see he wrote, John Carver wrote a foreword for the book. And when I read it, it just made me, it was just easier to understand than what they write. They're very academic, and this one makes it so much easier. She uses a lot of analogies, like riding a bike,
I did.
and it's the destination. It's not the destination, it's the actual journey. I mean, there's just a lot that made it much easier for me to understand.
I'll most likely pick it up on Audible and Kindle, and that'll be mine.
Yeah, and you know what? Unfortunately, she just passed away, so this might be the final edition. This is 2009. But I just think it's a great book. You can see mine's all beaten up.
Yeah, and we could buy those for you if you want after tonight.
Yeah. So recognizing that you guys are at very different levels of knowledge, I think what I'll do is I'll just, some of this will be repetitive, for you that know policy governance, and like for Garrett, it's gonna be really new, so, I don't know how to handle, like, Garrett, I know if you feel like you're just completely lost, and can't follow along, then just let me know, and then we can like kind of back up the
I try to
top a
be a
little
pretty
bit.
fast learner. so.
Yeah, okay. Well, and it's pretty intuitive too. I mean, it's pretty logical, the whole thing, but basically policy governance is a system. It's a governance system that's based on 10 principles. As far as I know, it's the only system of governance, like from soup to nuts. It's a system, not so much a model of governance. Like and actually in this book, you'll see a list of about 30 different types of models of governance. I feel like policy governance is unique in that it's an entire system that's built. And the system is based on 10 primary principles, which you'll see right up there on the screen. It was, as you know, developed by John and Miriam Carver in the 1970s, so it's been around for quite a while. It's not just used by school boards, but it's used by nonprofits, for-profits. I know banks that use it. It's used not only in the United States, but it's very big in Canada. And even some European countries use it. When I go to policy governance conferences, I'm always amazed at how many people from Canada are there. And all the different types of organizations, that are using it. So yeah, in this book, you'll see that she talks about it being a vehicle. It's a vehicle or a means of getting a board to where it wants to go. It's not a destination. So we're not trying to achieve policy governance. We're not trying to get there. We're using policy governance to get us somewhere else. the most effectively and efficiently way possible. Policy governance is not meant to be prescriptive. And, but it really, what it does is it provides a kind of a framework. And so that's why I think this, image of a house is a good one, because that's, you see the framework. And then inside you've got those 10 principles. And they're principles, they're not rules or tips. That's another thing that I learned early on, is that this isn't like, okay, if you do, it's not a recipe. If you do this, this, and this, your policy governance, presto, done. Like, there's not a lot of those little tips and things that will help you. You really have to learn the system from beginning to end. In policy governance, the board is ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the organization. And when we say organization in the context of public education, what do you think that organization is? I know you're all eating, so I feel terrible. I just asked that question.
It's the district.
The
We
district.
cover.
Thing.
Yeah, it's the district. So the district is the organization. So the board is ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the district, but you don't do everything, right? I mean, that's, you can't do everything because you're not typically here in the district. You're working at Dartmouth, and you're working at the aquatic center and doing volunteer work in the community. So it makes sense. I mean, even though you're responsible for things, you're not actually doing everything. So some people might wonder, well, then how can I be held responsible for something if I'm not actually doing it? And that's because you actually delegate a lot to your CEO. And in policy governance, and actually in Vermont state statute as well, the superintendent is called the CEO. So that syncs up kind of nicely, right? Your superintendent is your CEO according to Vermont law, and also in policy governance, that's the term that is used. So one of the strengths of policy governance is, I think, let me back up, that was bad grammar. I think one of the strengths of policy governance is, it really provides acute clarity about who does what. And when I say that, what I mean is that the board is hyper-focused. It's its job really to be focused on the results and the outcomes of the district. And it's very much a future-focused role. We're not looking at today, we're not looking at tomorrow, we're really looking down the road into the future about where we want the Hartford Unified School District to be. And then it leaves the day-to-day management and the operations, all the present day stuff, to the CEO and his team. So, this is similar to a lot of governance systems, and what I teach other boards that are not policy governance boards. There's a lot of crossover here, but basically the board is asking those why questions. Why do we exist as a district? And the superintendent is asking those other questions, the what and the how. So we'll see how it's done through the policies themselves, but that's pretty much kind of the broad brush stroke of policy governance. So I just wanted to quickly take a look at the principles of policy governance. I mean, we could workshop each of these individually, but are you familiar with the 10 principles? Like,
So
these look
these are
familiar?
basically captured in our policy set.
Yes,
So our
Yes.
policy set is almost a one-to-one translation of policy governance principles.
yes. Yeah, all of your policies are anchored to a principle. And in fact, when we do a case scenario, which I hope we'll get to, I'll give you a case scenario and I can say, is this upholding the principles of policy governance? And if it is, which one? And if it isn't, which one is it not upholding? So you should be able to see in different scenarios in the way a board behaves, whether they are being faithful to the principles of policy governance or not. I mean, I can summarize really quickly, and again, you're gonna get all this out of the book. But the ownership is really important, that we understand who our owners are, because and we'll see a diagram in a little bit about accountability and authority, but the owners in your school district are who? Have you guys talked about who the owners of the Hartford school system is?
It's the citizens. who
Yeah.
Live in the district and who, support,
Yeah.
and in some cases attend.
Yeah.
the School.
Yeah, exactly. So in this context of public education, your owners of your organization, in this case, the district, are your voters, your residents, the people that are, electing to put you here, passing the budget. So in policy governance, every organization must have a clearly defined and articulated owner. And it sometimes sometimes it's a legal owner, sometimes it's a moral owner.
Mhm.
But at least in public education, I feel like it's pretty obvious who our owners are, which is helpful. All owners are not stakeholders. That can trip up people, right? Like sometimes people use those two terms interchangeably and they say, oh, well, let me show you a diagram, which is interesting. You have stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are your owners. All owners are stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are owners. So for example, in the district, you have stakeholders here, your teachers are stakeholders, right? But unless they live in your district and pay you those taxes, they're not your owners. So it's just kind of important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about who your owners are. So you as a board, you are ultimately responsible to those owners, right? I mean, that's who you report to, that's who you get your authority from, and therefore you are accountable to your owners. And the other important part about owners is they are the ones that will inform you what their wishes are. What is their wish for this district? What do they want to see the Hartford School District to be? And that, how do you know what their wishes are? Like, how do we, aside from reading people's minds, which I haven't figured out how to do, how do we possibly know what our owners want of this district?
A lot of them just tell us.
They tell you.
Right out.
Unsolicited.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And years ago, when we did the first, when the previous board and administration adopted policy governance, they spent a couple of years working on the ends.
great, Good.
We've revised those over the years, but
good.
try to get input.
So when was the last, so you guys are familiar with the term end statement. You have an ends policy, right? So when did you last update it or revise
It was
it?
a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Oh, you are post-COVID, so that's good. Okay. Yeah, because I am,
The previous board, when they developed those for community, they did such a nice job. We didn't do like a wholesale,
yeah.
renovation or,
They needed some,
Very little that needed to be changed on it
they
all.
were really good.
that's good. Okay, so that's great.
Well, we thought they were really well done.
Yeah, so your end statement reflects the wishes of your owners. And do you remember the 3 questions that your end statement should, or your ends policy? Some people call it the global ends policy. Some people call it the global ends. There's a little bit of difference, but it's basically the same thing. But the 3 parts of your end statement is, do you remember those 3 parts?
No.
What difference does your organization want to make? For whom? And at what cost? And I'm sure if your board was
Right,
that
that's in
good,
there, yeah.
that those 3 parts are in your end statement. I didn't look at your end statement. I probably should have before I came
It's
here, but
on the internet if you're.
is it? Okay. Yeah, so and the other thing I advise policy governance boards, depending on if you, or even if you're a board that has a vision, even if you can't recite your policy, that ends policy or the vision, it's still good to be able to explain it as much as you can, as frequently as you can to your owners. And also to your stakeholders, so that everybody kind of gets used to that. Like, why do we exist? Who are we helping? And at what cost? We put our global end statement on our agendas, our meeting agendas. You do too, that's perfect. We put them on our minutes. We put them on any brochures that go out to the community. At our annual district meeting, when we present the budget, the first slide always shows what that ends policy is. It's just a way to remind everybody
We
why
have those cards somewhere.
Yeah.
you do.
We have a card that has the ends, the
Laminated.
the criminal, laminated.
Good.
We, have not distributed them recently,
No,
so,
we should use those.
but we have those and we do pull them out. They're in your, shoebox.
Yeah.
They're in your shoebox. Your box of tricks.
Depending on how tonight goes, I mean, we can, update this and.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
So that has your global end
Yes.
statement on there?
So,
Oh, yeah.
These aren't the ones like this I'd have to redo for our revision.
Yeah.
Right.
We haven't used these for a while.
So these were adopted in '09.
Yeah, our revision is similar, but not the same.
there's slight changes. It's,
So I should.
in spirit, it's much the same as the.
Yeah, the wording has changed. So like our global end statement at Barstow, we have like an umbrella statement here that's just like 4 lines.
Yeah.
And then underneath it, we've got these sub policies.
Mhm.
And I always tell people to try to at least be able to articulate that global end statement, that overarching
Right.
statement.
So the biggest changes from this policy is we redid the technology information skills portion of it
Yeah,
to reflect that technology is basically even more important than it was when this was done
Yeah.
and more integrated. And we added some diversity related language to emphasize even further our commitment to that. And that was about the only changes really.
and you know what? You have a beautiful universal end statement. I don't know if that changed at all. But that students will graduate from the Hartford School District equipped with a diverse set of knowledge. Like, if you could,
We haven't changed that.
you haven't changed that. I mean, if I were a board member, I would try to memorize that. And then say, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories that we believe, whatever you wanted to
Those are
call
all
those,
the, yeah.
6, like
Health and well-being, citizenship, and global.
academic excellence.
And we collapsed a few of them.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no, I think it's, what we did was we took our global end statement and then we, underneath it, we have, we enumerated what the AOE, their content areas and the transferable skills that the AOE had, so that we just felt like we were trying to respect what the state was, empowering us or not empowering, actually, delegating to us and recognizing that that's what we're expected to do. And so we just put that underneath what you call your universal ends, so.
It's a good idea.
But I can't memorize that, like I couldn't
No,
tell you what are the 6 different transferable skills, so I just focus on that big statement. So that's ownership, position of the board. This goes back to the board getting its authority from its owners, which, as you said, are your residents, your voters of your district towns. And then that authority is passed from you all, the board, to your CEO. And then we'll see a diagram that illustrates that. We talked about board holism, which you said before is tricky. And it is. What's hard about board holism? I mean, you're such a nice group of people. I mean, I can't imagine you're making a decision and one of you's going out there saying, I disagree with that decision, or,
I think it's the example of the politics of the day.
okay.
And quite frankly, this current board iteration hasn't had these issues. It was a couple years back that
Previous.
we had these problems. But there is sort of the example of the heroic congressman or whatever who stands up and says, I'll fight to the death over this, and and that's a much more political context.
Okay,
And it is a form of government which is legitimate. And it's what most people are used to.
Mhm.
So the expectation is that that's what they're going to be doing.
Mhm.
And so they sometimes come on the board thinking, I will be the iconoclast. I will stand for what's right, no matter what the board does, without accepting the idea that, yes, you are to stand and argue forthrightly and powerfully for your position.
Right,
But once the board has collectively reached a decision, that's the decision.
right,
And then we present a unified front to the community as
Right.
to what we have decided. And that's a hard lesson for some people to accept. Whether it's temperamentally, they're just unwilling and unable to give up a fight because they're sort of a pit bull personality. No matter what, they will dig into it and just never let go or whatever. But that has been sort of the hardest part of,
so that's, that's like outward facing, so I hear that. This principle of board holism is a little bit more inward facing, so, and I wanted to see if you're tripping yourselves up over this one, which is basically that the board speaks with one voice.
Hmm.
In terms of the instructions that it passes
well, that,
along, does that work okay for you? Like,
Yeah.
you're not instructing staff or principals?
no,
Okay.
no, we're not.
So that, I mean, you recognize that as individual board members, Garrett has no authority over
Yes,
Tom.
that portion. of
that
it,
part,
too.
so then you're.
The separation of
Yeah.
the staff role.
That's
and,
Yeah, and so I think of
And-
policy governance,
Yeah.
for me, that's, I mean, what you're saying is important, Peter, but I think this principle points more towards that. Where does Tom get his authority from? And
Right,
who is he accountable to? He's not accountable to Nancy, he's accountable to the board.
Yeah.
So as long as you get that, then you guys are good.
with the understanding of the special position of the chair relative to the board, but yes.
Yeah, yeah, and the board chair has a special role,
Yeah.
as the chief governing officer. We talked about as policies, we don't have to go over that. And then the board means policies. Do you guys, I know you do have, board means policies, don't you?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, okay. And then,
and,
executive limitations policies,
Mhm.
those are the guardrails that are
Mhm.
set up to
Mhm.
allow the maximum flexibility for Tom to use his skills and his creativity to do his job. And they are in the negative, are they, for you all?
Mhm.
Okay, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
So and those are, again, those are your expectations of the CEO about the operations of this organization. Those means are, yeah, so that, and that, what I like about the executive limitations under policy governance is they define things that are unacceptable instead of trying to list exhaustively everything you are allowed to do, which is impossible. So I like how the executive limitations kind of just provide the guardrails, but then within, as long as he stays inside those guardrails, he can use his
Right,
superpowers to do amazing stuff and not be worrying whether the board is going to be upset with him or not, because unless you've told him not to do something, then it's permitted. And I found that this was immensely helpful during COVID to our board. We had very little friction and misunderstanding during COVID, which was, as we remember, a very challenging time for a lot of school boards. And I even brought an article that I can leave here because I think yeah, it's on my computer, but this is a good article about how during COVID, boards that were following policy governance came through much better than boards that didn't, because of this clarity of roles and responsibilities, because of the executive limitations.
here, that page is down.
Just all the different, because of the connections between the board and the owners, and just everybody understanding their roles and responsibilities. It just made it so much easier to handle a crisis of that magnitude. So I was a little skeptical about policy governance. I thought it worked. I believed it worked. I really wanted it to work. And then COVID made me realize it works. Okay, I talked.
I think we did get through COVID relatively well.
Did you?
I thought so.
I
Yeah,
mean, we stayed open, kids were in school. We had a few meetings that were heated,
yeah,
but the board was very clear around keeping kids safe. So we were very strict about masking. You know, and early on, they said, we're sticking to the CDC guidance.
yeah.
When the community, the county is a medium or above, we're masking.
Mhm.
When they fall below, we can unmask. Some people in the community didn't like that. We had a few meetings with hundreds of people.
But in terms of the friction among the board between
No, I
you
think you were,
No,
they
no,
were unified.
no.
Yeah, it wasn't,
and
but that's sort of how we got through it, was like, yep, we decided this as a group and we're.
and I just remember the guidance coming from Montpelier was changing minute by minute, hour by
Oh, yeah.
hour. And so I was thinking, if I wasn't a policy governance board, I would be, I mean, how could you possibly you keep us, the board, informed of all of that was happening? I mean, as long as you knew what you weren't supposed to do, you had the ability to pivot and to like react to those instructions coming from the CDC or the state, like on a dime, and not worried about your board saying, second guessing your decision making, right? I
Right.
mean, I think that's
Well,
how
yeah,
I felt.
because I had lots of people coming to me depending on how they felt.
Yeah.
That got sort of political.
Got political
And
fast.
people would come
Yeah.
with, you can't make me mask, or you can't make my kid mask.
Yeah,
They're
We-
right to go to
yeah.
school, and I was like, well, no, the board has already decided.
yeah, exactly.
So Tom set up a very good program where he worked with the school nurses to figure out
Yeah.
what the latest advice was and what therefore the district would be doing.
Right,
And we had approved that process.
Yeah.
So we were not involved in any way, shape or form with the day-to-day, we're putting on masks today, we're taking them off tomorrow. And sometimes it was a little bit wonky because
Mhm.
it would change quickly and people would either be celebrating the change or hating it. And it didn't matter which way it went. There was gonna be,
All
nobody
somebody's
was
gonna
ever
be
happy.
angry with.
But
them, sure.
because we had a process and
Yeah.
we were saying, no, that is the process we're following. We were able to not disregard, but not be disrupted by people who were coming on to say, you gotta change what you're doing because of X, Y, or Z
Right.
reasoning or belief or whatever it was. No, this is the process we are following and
Right. And that gets to clarity and coherence of delegation.
Mhm.
Like, I think one of the principles that helped us out during COVID was this identification of any delegatee must be unambiguous as to authority and responsibility. So as long as we're clear who's responsible for what and who's accountable to whom, then things work well. And we'll look at that in a diagram in a second. Monitoring, I just want to touch on that. Do you guys monitor organizational performance against your policies, right? You do policy monitoring reports?
yes.
Okay,
We were doing that very thoroughly every single meeting,
yeah,
but, yeah, with all the issues with budgets this year, we sort of fell off
fell off the
Yeah.
schedule.
Got
a
off the
bit.
wagon a little.
we got off the wagon. But every year for the last
So the report,
7, 8 years, we've been on a very strict calendar.
Oh, good. So you have a
we have
list.
been reporting against whether or not we are adhering to our governance policies, whether we're observing the executive limitations. We do have monitoring reports from time to time on the school district.
Yeah.
But the regular reporting, monitoring is our own interaction with superintendent and with each other to make sure we're following the rules
Mhm.
in terms of how we will govern.
We were regular, like every board member was assigned a monitoring report
For
for
a
each meeting.
different policy
for a
or
different
board
policy.
policy. Good.
Right, yeah, and
We've sort of
that's part of why I wanted to do the training is because we sort of gotten away from that.
I know,
last
it's easy
6
to
months.
do that, but
Yeah.
you could, at your retreat, or whenever you have like a big meeting and set your annual goals, I don't know if you, I'll leave this with you too, you can use it or disregard it, but this is what we do, where we actually have a calendar.
Yep.
Is that what you
We
do?
have a calendar of
With the
who, and
different
who does which
policies.
reports.
And then what month
Yeah,
you're gonna monitor those reports,
and we attempt to
just keep.
schedule them coinciding with the way the board school year works out.
Perfect.
So the
Yeah.
financial reports come out when
Yep,
the exact limitation on financial issues
Right.
is about the same time that the outside auditors are coming back with their report,
right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like, I know at Barstow, we just did the board job
Yeah.
description. No, board members' code of conduct during the reorganization
Right,
meeting. So instead of signing a code of conduct, which many boards do,
Mhm.
what you do is you monitor that one policy called the board members' code of conduct. And then you can see, that becomes like your code of conduct in a way, right? I mean, so yeah, I like how you align whatever's happening
Yeah,
during the
I
year
think
to the
that's
policy,
it.
yeah.
That's a very elaborate, color coded.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Topics are identified, but.
But it's good to be
Yeah, It's
organized.
just been really the last 4 months that we've sort of.
Wow. It's easy to get off track.
Well, yeah, things got so crazy with our budget this year and trying to make sure we were doing our.
Are you able to
due
get to
diligence.
all of your executive limitations once a year?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
provide a monitoring report for each of them?
Yeah,
That's
that's
great.
what we were doing.
Okay, good. Yeah,
And we
that's
also
great.
have additionally monitoring reports on issues within the school that we will say, superintendent, we want a monitoring report on discipline in the schools or.
But how do you justify that if it's not written, or is it written in one of your policies?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like with
One of our
the
policies.
EL10, which is one we created around race,
Okay.
anti-racism
So-
and equity.
So we
Okay.
will point
So
to,
you,
yes, and say, according to this, you're supposed to or not supposed to. We're concerned about the following issue
Got it.
that falls into it. Go out and research, come back and tell us what your thought is
Hmm.
about what's happening in the schools on this subject.
yeah, because that is within your purview. If you feel like there's this issue brewing, you don't have to wait
Right.
Yeah.
6 months down the road for Tom to present the report. If you think you want an interim report now,
Yeah,
then it's within your right to ask for
Yeah,
that. So you
yeah.
guys are doing.
or on a specific sub-issue part of it,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
okay.
okay. Seems like you're doing a really good job. Garrett, you're gonna have good coaches here. I don't think you're gonna be in any trouble.
I think, where it gets complicated is when someone in the public has a specific issue. Or like when we had the budget and we had to make cuts.
I know.
And people wanted to know, well, what were the cuts, or how did you make the decision to make that cut? And it got into
And how do
sort
you,
of the policy governance. even.
So how do you-
I wanna know how Tom made the cut and who did this and why that position instead of this position, or who was involved in the decision, and not from the board, but just
right,
the
from
public
public,
come in and, the board wants to be responsive because they're the owners.
right?
So that gets a little,
Mhm.
It gets dicey.
that's what dicey.
At the same time, we explain, they don't necessarily like it, but
Right,
this is the process. We have decided as a board, we need to get a cut of X percentage of the current budget. You go and come back with the cuts that are going to reach that. We don't get involved in the, okay, this position's going, or that position's going, or this program gets cut.
Mhm,
That isn't our role.
mhm.
We're just making sure that Tom understands
What the
what we're
parameters
trying to
are.
get to.
Yeah.
And what the parameters are in terms of how much money and so forth, and
Yeah. And reminding Tom that you have this policy called your universal
Yeah.
end, so you want to have a budget that reflects
that's to the
Your
extent the
ability
resources.
to get towards this ends
Yeah,
policy.
and there is the whole,
I know.
yeah,
And we're going through that now on our board, because it's,
Oh, I can imagine.
we
the
may
second
not be
budget
able-
failure.
we may not be able to be in compliance with our ends policy,
Yeah.
because if we cut to that point, how could we possibly be as our
Yes.
ends policy says, that, you know, all enrolled students are empowered with the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed to be successful and contributing citizens of a global society. You know, like all of a sudden you're wondering, well, how can we do this if we don't have any more extracurricular activities?
Hmm.
I mean, if we just become, I mean, so these are all these ideas. going
Yeah,
through
but
my-
built within this
Offer
is,
foreign language.
You can't offer foreign language or global languages
Yeah,
go
you're
away.
cutting.
So how are we helping our kids become global citizens? So yeah, but it's good. You guys are doing, I think you're doing, you're gonna be in good shape. I'm telling you, you got good people here. All right, let me show you this. So I love this diagram. It's so simple. Have you ever seen this? All right, this is a good one. It's, okay, so we've talked about the owners being at the
Mhm.
top, right? Everything stems from our owners. The authority comes from them to the board, down to the CEO, to the staff and the clients and customers or students. And then logically, the accountability just goes in the opposite direction. What I love about the diagram though is the point.
Mhm.
And the reason it's shaped this way is because it represents, like, the owners are a big group of people, right? So there's a long line. That line denotes that there's a lot of people there that are, giving authority to a board, which is a smaller group. But then that authority goes through this very narrow point to one person, right? I mean, just, he is your direct report. He
he's
is
our only employee.
your only employee. He's the only employee. And from there, he then has the authority over a bigger group of people, the staff, and then the staff over the customers and clients. So I think this is kind of a clever diagram that illustrates that point.
Mhm.
No pun intended, very well. That there's just that one employee in your district that you are giving instructions to. And how do you give your instructions to that employee? Through your policies. And, I don't think I have anything else unless you guys, I mean, that's a pretty straightforward thing, I think, and
At
then,
least in principle,
huh?
at least in principle.
It does, but I find if I start to struggle a little bit, I go back to this in my mind, and
Right.
it sure helps me a lot, especially, again, if you get some scenarios like that when you're caught in the grocery store and somebody comes to you and says, I can't stand the PE teacher, why don't you get rid of them?
Mhm.
And then I'm just like, "Ooh." But then I think
Okay.
about this and I think about that board holism
Mhm.
principle, and all of a sudden I can take a deep breath and be like, okay. I know how to handle this.
What do you say? I'm just curious.
We're gonna
Does
do.
that happen? All right,
Let's
we'll
do
do
the
that
case
later.
scenario.
All
We're
right,
gonna do, we'll
never
do the
mind.
PE one. I like that one.
Yeah.
I always pick on PE teachers because I like them. But, I haven't met a bad PE teacher ever, so. But I had to do that one. Plus the one at our school is getting ready to retire after 40 years, so. So we basically, as a policy governance, have 3 core functions. Ownership, linkage, policy development, and policy monitoring. So, ownership linkage, as we talked about, is that beautiful ends policy that you all have, right? And once you, get the input from your community about, what their wishes are, and you put it in your ends policy, that linkage is pretty strong. It doesn't mean that it's over, right? Because you're still accountable to the, to your public or to your owners. So you still are expected to report to them how you are moving the district towards the ends. So the linkage always happens, right? But the way you express on behalf of your owners, the way you express their wishes to Tom is through that ends policy. So everything in policy governance is communicated through a policy. And that's another thing that helps, I think, keep it really clear. The policy development you guys have done, you can always amend and revise. Do you ever amend or revise your policies as needed?
Exactly.
Yeah. When there's like a new mandate or something coming out.
Yeah, so we
just did that one with,
Yeah. So whenever,
something with the financial one, remember
Yeah.
Russ North,
So-
previous board member.
whenever there is either a issue that has come up
Yeah,
So for instance, concussions, how do we deal with concussions?
Yeah,
That is actually a interest to the board. We want this dealt with. Then we generate a policy through that. There is a state mandate of some side. You will have the following policy.
mhm,
We then will implement that policy, though we never do so without putting our stamp on it.
mhm.
Even if there is state mandated language, we don't just take the language and
Right.
plop it in. We actually,
Craft it.
we craft it to make sure that it fits our circumstances
Mhm, mhm.
and, sometimes for clarity. Uh, I, by the way, am sort of the board's policy committee, so I tend to get
Oh, you
all the
actually
draft.
have a committee of one?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah. The two
Well,
of us
Tom's involved in
so
it.
Tom,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but
Okay.
the,
Sometimes it's, yeah,
Okay.
we bring in others who have particular expertise,
Yeah.
but you know, there's so many policies.
Yeah,
so
That's
whether
what
the
we do.
full.
the non-policies you're
Yeah,
talking
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
like
the
the
state mandated.
state. So you
So
have a
all of-
separate set of.
So we've
policies.
got a whole set of, federally mandated you shall do, state mandated thou shall do.
Yeah.
Then stuff that flows out of
Yeah,
the boards. Okay, we have decided we haven't done enough on.
We did the,
Racism.
we did the harassment,
Yeah,
remember?
whole harassment,
Harassment,
you know,
whole- we did the whole
harassment,
thing.
or
uh,
equity. Did you have to do
Equity.
one?
yeah, we've done all of these policies where
Yeah.
we.
Tons of.
And depending on the policy,
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of people are asked to contribute towards ideas.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's very few people, it depends, but. And then because of my experience as an attorney, I end up sort of polishing and then it
He
comes to
gets
the
the
board.
wordsmith it.
Mm-hmm.
I wordsmith it and then it goes to the board and they tell me where I got it wrong and we'll go correct that and we bring it back and it works.
You know, they're mandated from
Yeah.
state, we start with the VSBA model.
And then we.
I don't know if in your district, does the superintendent just do that on their own, or how do you do that,
So,
following strictly policy governance, then you've got all those state mandated policies around everything from A to Z, basically.
so the way
Probably
we
50.
used to handle is when we'd get a state mandated policy, we would go to the policies
Mhm.
and see, can we work it in to
Something.
the policy?
Right.
It, like, does it fit under, say, treatment of staff or,
Mhm.
treatment of, students and
Yeah.
parents and guardians? And if there's nothing clearly there, then I would recommend that we write a sub-policy and make sure that the interpretation of that policy expresses the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
But what happened was when I got off the board, when I came back to see the board, the policy packet, all of a sudden I see like the VSBA policy just plopped right
Yeah,
into here
that's
on
right.
equity.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
that
like,
builds
it's very
on it.
jarring.
And it doesn't work.
fit.
We're
No,
Still.
Which is part of why we
Cleaning up.
clean, we polish, we say that that's inappropriate for,
yeah,
and so we'll do it and. So far the process has worked
Yeah.
relatively well. We distinguish between policies and procedures.
yeah,
The superintendent's office is very much responsible for procedures in most cases, unless they are actually part of the mandate.
Mhm.
Sometimes you will have a policy and it will have the following procedures.
right.
And then we will play both sides of that. And Tom tends to run the procedures by me for assistance with the drafting, less about the content.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
so
you could.
recent policies were the one on how we deal with trans students
Right,
and so forth.
oh, right.
So
right.
we've done a lot of this kind of work with some regularity.
And some of them are just
Yeah,
too old.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that
they
we
need to
also
be.
try to go through and go back and look at it. That's the harder thing, is just finding the time to say, okay, the last time we touched policy X was 10 years ago.
Right,
And is it still appropriate? Most of the time, we make very few changes, because we usually did a pretty good job of drafting it, but we need to revisit them. And
We
Tom and
just
I,
committed to a couple days this summer where we're just gonna sit down.
Go
and try to
through your
handle it.
policies
yeah.
and see,
We can't, yeah, you just can't keep up with them.
we've committed to, we have not yet undertaken it just because we ran into the buzzsaw of the budget.
right,
But we have committed to revisiting all of our policies in a light of equity.
yeah, oh,
So
great.
how does that play out?
But through the-
Are there issues that you wouldn't think about in first reading, but because of the way they
Yeah.
implement it on different populations in different ways are inequitable?
Yeah, like student conduct and discipline.
Yeah.
So another thought I had is, I sent this to you guys, right? The policy governance source document and the frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
There is a question in here, Tom, that talks about how do you deal with state mandated policies? So, and using a policy governance model, so that answers your question. I think it's question number 5. No, that's a different one, but it's in here. Yeah, legislation requires our board to do certain things that policy governance boards don't normally do, such as hire and fire staff other than the CEO. Can policy governance still work?
Yeah.
So it gives you some good guidance about how you can do it, how you can kind of weave it into
Yeah,
your
we just-
policies.
He figures out what we're gonna do and then we say yes.
And then say yes. The other thing that some superintendents will do, I think Essex Westford does it this way, and Jeannie used to do it at RNSU, is just have those state mandated policies just separate. Yeah, we just had, and we still would have to review those policies once every couple of years or whatever we did. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on them. We really focused more on the policy governance policies, but at least we were doing what was expected of us. So those are 2 ways you can handle it, but look at that. FAQ.
That's kind of how we handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Separate.
Separate, yeah.
so,
So then you do your policy monitoring. So everything's about policies. Everything is translated through your policies. And you guys have probably seen this circle before. This is new to Garrett. So we have 4 different types of policies under policy governance. Garrett, we talked about the ends, which is that the why we exist, for whom, where, our destination. That ends policy is the superintendent is responsible for implementing the ends policy.
and they say things, the superintendent shall not allow the district's property to be put out.
Those are executive
Yeah,
limitations.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
then you've got the second category called executive
Yeah.
limitations. And I think what's in parentheses there is the approximate number, like the average number you might have of policies.
Mhm.
So that's another thing I like about policy governance is that you don't have hundreds of policies. You
Yeah.
might have 30,
Yeah,
like this is our policy booklet. This is it.
we have 10 ELs,
You have 10 ELs.
10 ELs, 5 board.
Well, you're able to, yeah, good, I was not able to get
And,
in.
then the governance process is
Yeah.
9.
It's 9. Yeah.
And,
So it's probably similar,
yeah,
Yeah, it's very similar.
right?
And so what's
Mm.
interesting is that the board is
Yeah,
actually
I would
responsible for monitoring all of the policies.
Right.
All, so that's
May just be
the
end up
heavy
getting them
lift
to-
for you guys, is that you're monitoring the ends policy as Tom's reporting those the progress on those policies or compliance. You're monitoring the executive limitations, again, that he's responsible for implementing, but you're still responsible for monitoring, and you can't delegate that work. You have to do that work. You all are responsible for implementing on the left side, the governance process and the board meetings, or some people call it the board management delegation. And so you have to be responsible for making sure you're in compliance with those policies and you're monitoring, you're kind of self-policing, if you will, yourselves. But you can also have input into that process, like if the board is monitoring a policy and the interpretation or the evidence isn't really syncing up with what you've observed, then you can always give input as they monitor at a meeting at the policy. We used to ask Jeannie for advice, like, what do you think? Are we being too generous to ourselves? And she'd say, well, you know, sometimes she'd have ideas of ways we could improve or evidence that was kind of against what we were saying. So it's a good accountability kind of keeping each other
Yeah.
in check, you
Well,
know?
once we go a little further, that's one of the areas of concern, is not the board stuff, but the way we do the monitoring report.
Okay,
We had a previous trainer that sort of recommended that we put them in the consent agenda. I told you about this.
I
And
wouldn't
then
put
they're
them in a
not
consent
living,
agenda.
breathing documents. They're sort of,
Right,
they're sort of,
that's true.
I would
forgotten
never-
about.
Mhm.
They're supposed to be the mainstay, like the topic that you discuss at the meetings, like, you know,
Yeah, I wouldn't
so
put,
that's where I think we need help,
okay.
whether that's tonight or some future thing. if the
Yeah,
board
policy
wants to
monitoring
continue.
is something that is, its own separate training, but we definitely, you know what I could do? I could leave you with, a handout.
Yeah, I
at the
don't wanna
very
get
least.
you off track. but
No,
I
no,
mean,
that's
where I
fine.
think we've had some
We all,
growing pains.
whenever I, talk.
Then we're not discussing, you know, and it's not a living, breathing thing, it's just locked into the consent agenda and
Mhm.
Mhm.
we don't really discuss it. So if there was an issue, we should be going over that and saying, oh, well, in this policy, I don't know if you did that well. Or,
Yeah, I agree with you. We need help
You
with
know?
that.
like, that's where we
Yeah.
kind of,
So
and
right,
it made it sort of stale, so that's how I think it easily
so
fell
right now
off.
your policy monitoring is in your consent agenda?
No,
Cool
a report is written, put into the consent agenda.
We,
People are expected to read it before the meeting,
Yeah.
and then if they're okay with it, it sits in the consent agenda and they approve it. If they have a problem with it, they ask
oh,
at the
then they asked to
beginning
take it out.
to pull it out and discuss it.
In theory, practice, it just tends to go in and,
Mhm.
Yeah,
we've done it both ways. We did a lot of more of the
Mhm.
actual presentation, and the person who was responsible for the report on
Right.
that person would actually have to go through their presentation.
Right,
We had a standardized form that allowed for
yeah.
easy and consistently doing that.
yeah,
And
But if you're not an IT person, it didn't
Yeah.
work well.
right.
But
I'm not the IT person. I made my own little, so I said, this is how you're gonna get it from me because I can't make that fit in my,
yeah,
Yeah,
so.
and my biggest concern, like, if we're really committed to this, they have to be what we're talking about.
Exactly,
That's the work,
yeah.
instead of all the other stuff
Yeah,
that we get
you're right.
sidetracked with.
Mhm.
But again, that's a big commitment on all of us to say,
Yeah, but that's part of our job, I think,
yeah, we're gonna.
that we need to be doing it.
so that,
And I suppose we could pull one like we used to do, where we made sure it was at the time that that topic would come up, you know, budget and financial stuff. So in a way, that could work if there was a concern around the cuts that have to be made. We can refer to that policy and go, where does this fit into the
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
policy?
you live in your policies and that's how, and in fact, I always like to see board members having their policy packet on the table, because if there's ever an issue that comes up and you're caught off guard, you're not exactly sure how to handle it, the answers are in your policies.
yeah,
And,
so if you look
Yeah,
at,
I think it just gets hard for the board when
Yeah.
somebody from the public or
mhm,
a teacher comes, a stakeholder, and they're like, and the board's like, well, we don't do that because we're policy governance
Yeah.
and we're sort of hands off, and people are like, yeah, but I'm really mad at him. You know, how does the board navigate
So-
that, so they don't feel like they're telling the owner to go?
yeah, we've tripped over our
You know-
words. Be careful how you choose your words. First of all, I mean, when you say that's not our job, oh, that's
Mm.
very
That's
off-putting.
not a thing to say.
No, you don't say that.
No, cause they're an owner,
That's right.
and you want
Right.
to respond, so you'll.
yeah, but they also sometimes think that because they're the owner, they're the ones who are setting the policy, making those
Yeah,
decisions.
yeah, that's true.
And
too.
they're not.
Yeah.
That is our job,
Oh, exactly. yeah.
and we
But there's
are
nice
guided
ways
by,
to put it.
yes, we are guided by their opinions and the feedback we get.
Mm.
Yeah,
But we ultimately have to make the decisions on what we think are best for the collective,
Mm.
yeah.
and.
Yeah.
But if it's an issue,
Yeah.
if it's, I mean, it's like this in good governance or policy
Yeah.
governance
Mm.
boards. If it's something that's not related to your vision or your ends policy, or then you really should be referring the person to the appropriate level and using that chain of command, right? The chain of communication. So that would be it'd be very appropriate for you as a board member to say, well, gosh, I really understand you're frustrated and this sounds really frustrating. This is like not in a board meeting, right? This is out in the public. Have you spoken to, and then, refer them to the right level of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've done that.
There's a lot, but,
There's-
yeah.
And then at the board meetings, if you have public comments and somebody comes in and says, I'm really upset about this. I mean, I don't know how your public comment is written on your agendas, but we always say that we're not going to necessarily respond.
If you look at the
moment.
bottom of the package, we got.
You have your rules.
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't have a board packet. There we go. Yeah, respond. Anyone making comment can expect a response that follows. Okay, yeah, refer the matter, add the topic to specified, hold a public hearing.
It's easier said than done.
I know it is.
Yeah.
I hear
and
you.
especially when emotions are.
I hear
Oh,
you.
yeah, when there's
Because you wanna
30
pick the-
people mad about
I know.
whatever
It's
happened.
brutal. But you have to try to be,
Mm.
it's not easy. I
It's the
know.
same thing that you would tell your teachers. You have to be professional about it. You have to be professional about how you're gonna respond to them, how we're gonna answer them.
Mhm.
Careful of what the words are that come tumbling out of
Yeah.
our mouths because
Yeah.
we're in an uproar too.
Yeah,
And it's.
And I get the same thing all the time. If someone wants to come to me and jump over the building administration or the teacher, they're like, my kid came home and they said this and blah. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so you would go to the teacher,
yeah,
then teacher doesn't help you, you go to the principal.
right.
Principal, doesn't help you or the issue
Right.
continues, then you come to me,
Right, yeah,
and the board sort of the same thing,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've
When I
got- we
first
have
was
a
on the board.
process, so
Yeah, when I was first on the board, because I'm pretty well known in the community,
Yeah,
and people, they were calling me, they were texting me, and I'm thinking,
They don't care what the,
and I would come to them, finally, I said, you guys, and they said, just don't respond. And then I became the clerk of the board, and then it was my responsibility to respond. So, but we worked that out, we've worked that
Mm.
through that too, but it's a very, and as I've said 100,000 times, I think with my heart,
yeah,
not with my head.
I
It
know,
comes from my heart first, and then I sit back and thinking, oh, wait,
I know.
I've got to rethink
Yeah.
this.
It might help you,
So-
Nancy, just to have a little spiel, like I've
That's what,
written
yeah,
myself a little, like,
we've worked on
and
that,
just
yeah,
working so that you know how to respond
Mm.
compassionately, you care.
exactly,
But
exactly.
you have the language right there, so you don't
Yes.
panic in the moment, because I'm the same
Right.
way, I'm like, I wanna fix it, let me see what I can do for you, and that's not,
Yeah.
that kind of
Exactly.
just makes the whole system
Yeah,
not
yeah, it
work.
makes it hard for me, because
It makes it
sometimes
hard
like
for
I
you.
really haven't even heard of the issue.
Right,
But they're already at the board meeting and the whole world knows.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I kind of get a shot to fix it
right,
before you come here.
right,
I
right,
think it's what's best for the organization.
It is.
If I blew it
truly
off,
is.
that'd be
It's just-
fine.
right,
If I
No,
didn't
yeah.
answer or didn't call back, but if I haven't, then talking about it at a public meeting becomes this much bigger issue.
It sure
It's
does.
like, And it's also makes me look like crap,
But,
when-
and another thing you can
But I
remind
kinda
somebody,
have, yeah.
depending on the issue,
Mhm.
is you can say, I hear what you're saying, I understand. I have to tell you that if this is an issue that makes its way through, it could end up here at the board table, and we have a quasi judicial role to
Mhm.
play.
Yep, cool.
So the less information I know about this now, the better. So
Right.
you can always, depending on the issue, it might not be that
And
serious,
we use,
but
we
if you
use
can
that,
say,
that wording.
educate, because a lot of
Yes.
people don't know that you do act as a quasi judicial
Right.
board. Hopefully not not very frequently, but it can happen,
Mhm.
and so it's better to protect the integrity of the process.
Mhm.
By
We do
you,
that a lot.
by
Mhm.
you just saying, I'm sorry, this is, we need to,
Mm.
so
But
that,
there are times when it's just impossible to shut it down because people are really concerned and
Yeah.
they're hot, and if you
Right.
try to shut it down, they get worse.
I know they
Cause
do,
they,
and then they think you're being,
so you're kind of like,
One thing you could think about doing, we did this years ago, I don't know if this would help you, but we did a policy governance brochure that we just put everywhere in the schools, in the town halls. We put it online. I can send you if I have a copy. So it was like just a trifold. And it just talked about what is policy governance. It doesn't go into this detail,
Yeah,
but
that'd be great.
you know,
Yeah.
it just, and so a lot of, and I see this with a lot of boards, they struggle not so much amongst themselves, but it's more with the public and the public not getting what policy governance is. Even principals sometimes don't get it.
But even if there was a way to like, remember those commercials when I was a kid, there used to be those great Saturday morning, like infomercials?
Yeah.
You know, how does a bill become a
Oh, yeah,
law?
yeah.
Oh, but that sort of thing, like, in policy governance, how does an issue get addressed so that, you know, so you're not giving them, like, I think they think we're giving them some sort of snow job of putting them off.
Absolutely.
And it's like, no, it's actually more serious,
Yeah,
like in policy governance, because if it gets to the board, that means I haven't done something.
right.
So
Right.
like, you've gotta say, you're not
Mhm.
following the executive limitations or whatever it
Right,
is.
right.
So it's a much bigger, meaty,
Yeah.
serious
No, it
than
is.
just Mrs. Smith is mad because Johnny
Actually,
didn't go to recess. You know, like, I'm
Yeah.
not downplaying, but that's the kind of,
Sure.
the difference. Whereas, you know, the policy governance side would be more like, no one's getting recess at the school. The principal doesn't like recess and Tom hasn't done anything.
mhm,
And then
to change.
there's the intersection
You know.
of policy governance limitations on what we do
mhm.
and legal and other kinds of limitations on how we can get involved with
Yeah, that's
personnel
true, too,
issues.
yeah.
So we want to know about our favorite person X who got either railroaded or didn't get respected or whatever their thought is about this individual. We need to run them on a rail. Why aren't you running him out on town on a rail covered with tar and feathers? Or why aren't you promoting him to the next
The
Yeah.
next king.
king, whatever which way it goes? And the response is, we can't talk to you about that,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is seen as some kind of
Yes, no.
and both a snow job or disrespectful or a combination of this. And the fact is, we literally cannot talk about
That's
this.
illegal.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's in
But I
statute.
think,
Yeah.
like, and this is hard to explain because it's harder, but I mean, the real work, I think, for the board and for me is in those policies. So
Mhm.
you want to know that in the policy, I've covered every possible question you could have about any issue. Do you know what I mean? So like, in general, you might be concerned about my supervision of an employee.
Mhm.
Well, where does supervision of employees or show up in the executive limitations?
Mhm.
And that's where we should put our effort in. Like, I wanna know that the superintendent thoroughly does this
Mhm.
and hires and fires and disciplines and evaluates
Mhm.
principals.
Mhm.
So like,
Yeah, and
that's
that,
where the real work is, not when the issue comes up and Mrs. So-and-so isn't doing something. You go back to the policy and you go, I think there's problems here, here, and here.
mhm,
And let's make Tom answer those questions.
mhm. Yeah, you can ask for.
'Cause that's much deeper than just the superficial thing of,
Mhm,
you know, the so-and-so isn't doing a good job.
mhm,
Everybody's mad.
mhm, mhm. I agree
I don't know, I'm
No,
trying
I
to make,
totally
like, it's,
agree.
it's sometimes hard to go from the theoretical
to the practical.
policy governance to like, how do I actually do my job as a board member?
Mhm,
And make
Yeah.
sure that we're holding the superintendent accountable, but not micromanaging him
mhm.
or her to death.
Yeah.
Policy
You
governance
know, it's,
deals well with how do you make the organization function well?
Mhm.
It does not deal at all with how do you deal with the politics of the situation?
Mhm.
And that becomes
yeah. And in a small town with 5
difficult
board members.
and can become a conflict.
Mhm, mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and, whether it's because of statute says I can't talk about this.
right.
This is confidential. Confidential actually does mean confidential,
Yeah, yeah, it is against
or-
the law.
or it's
right.
against the law,
Yeah,
or, it's just
yeah,
the way you would like to see me respond is not a way that
Right,
we respond under our governance process. We
right,
do not get up and blow up and
Right.
make lots of big noise about it. We deal with it in a steady process that looks to, are we in compliance with the policy? Were the processes followed?
Mhm.
Did the result fit what the policies were intended to result?
Mm-hmm.
When, if they did, it's unfortunate you're not happy, but that's the way it is.
Mhm.
If they didn't, why didn't they? Is it involved in execution against the policies, or is it a problem with the policy itself?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
Right,
those are not sexy, easy
answer,
to give to
Nobody-
somebody who is inflamed and unhappy.
I know, yeah. But it doesn't matter what your governance system
Yeah.
would be if somebody's inflamed and
Yeah.
unhappy, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's a reflection just of human nature and behavior, so I would, again, just. I know it's easier said than done, all of this is, and we can do a little practice if you want right now. But yeah, just really, recognize that that there is, the system is set up the way it's set up for a reason, and you have that accountability, and you have that, authority, and it's very clear. And, no matter, I mean, again, you just, it might not be the right moment to have the conversation with the person, you
Right.
know, it could be just, we need to, like you said in your, in your public comment rules, like you may just need to refer the matter, to an executive session or add the topic to a future board agenda. I mean, you don't have to deal with it right then and there, whether you're in the grocery store or if you're at the board table. And I think the more scripts you can come up with, just to help you, so you don't panic or say something wrong, that can also be really, really helpful. So how would you handle this? I'm curious to know if you did get a neighbor or who complains about the PE teacher.
Tell them to stop, don't tell them anymore. You know, have you spoken to the PE teacher or the principal of that school?
Yeah,
If no, that would be where I would refer them to, and if not, I would refer them to Tom. And then most likely, I guess if it wasn't resolved, it would probably come up in an executive session,
mhm.
you know, something to talk about.
It's an easier one because it's a personnel matter, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah.
In some sense, because we're actually limited.
Yeah.
I can't, I understand you have an issue. This is the process, but I cannot talk about specifics of the case.
Mhm.
Right,
And that is easy in that we know what we should be saying. It's difficult, and that is not the response the individual who is confronted us wants. They want resonance with their anger, their pain. They want empathy.
Or more so if it's your
Yeah.
neighbor.
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Yes, of
There's
course.
Yeah.
a assumed relationship.
Yeah,
that you have with
exactly.
that
right.
person.
And it
So,
becomes difficult.
Or your daughter.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, exactly. But to some degree,
My daughter and I
somebody close
found-
enough to you should understand, but.
Well, oh no, my daughter and I did this many years ago, shortly after I came on the board the very first time, and I said, there's gonna be times that we don't need to be talking about this.
Mhm.
You're gonna have one side and I'm gonna have another side,
Mhm.
and it doesn't mean that I might not. It may mean that I agree with you, but on this subject, we can't talk,
Mhm.
and so we don't. It just makes it so much easier. I mean, she can maybe vent to me about something, but we don't talk about it. I'll just let her vent,
Yeah.
or I may vent to her
Mhm.
about something, but it's not some kind of discussion.
Mhm.
And I think that with a close neighbor, like we have some really close neighbors to us,
Yeah.
and she's a school teacher at a private school, and he's a professor out at Dartmouth. And so there's times that we talk about situations, but not anything specifics.
Right,
Just, well, how do you handle this over at your school?
yeah,
And so, you know, she can,
yeah.
or she'd say, well, golly, I hear you guys are having a really hard time over there. Yes, we are, but it's gonna be okay. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
gonna be okay.
Yeah,
We'll
that
get through it.
empathetic listening and that reflective
Yes,
back, like
exactly.
all those are skills
Yes.
as a board member we have to have, yeah. That to reflect what we're hearing, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
Do I understand this correctly? Okay, and then even that can kind of cool somebody down when they realize how, if they've been heard, that goes a long ways.
And sometimes that's all they want.
And sometimes that's all they want. What's the answer to number 4? So if that were to happen, Garrett gave a good answer to like how you would handle it. What would you do after? Would you take any additional action other than advising that person where to go? What, you as a board member, what would you do if anything else?
And follow up with Tom.
Follow up with Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, don't let there be any surprises.
Or maybe follow up with the chair. I just had.
And the
this-
chair. Yep.
I just had the
both.
discussion on X.
Yep.
It seems to be a subject of controversy.
I
Remember,
agree.
we are still mandated reporters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's a case like that, you
Yeah.
need to be
Well,
making
then
the
that's a
call.
whole different,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a whole.
But depending on,
Follow the police.
depending on what it is, it
Stay
may
on
be, I was not aware of this issue, I will bring it to people's attention.
Yeah,
It may be, if it's a personnel issue, like this example, I really can't talk to the specifics.
Mhm.
But you can be assured that we are making sure that the process is being followed. Um,
I might
That's a
say,
hard
I
one.
might say, especially if it's my neighbor, I'd say, I can face legal action or I may have to appear in court, so please, I wanna help you, but don't tell me anymore.
yeah,
And,
protect the integrity of the process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might they refer them to the principal of the building too? Like, have you gone to the teacher, have you gone to? the
Yeah.
principal?
Exactly. But as a board member, I wouldn't call the principal to give
No.
the heads
Oh,
up.
no, no.
As
Oh,
a
no,
board
no.
member, I'd go to the
Yeah, you
superintendent.
feel like you had to call
Yeah.
We
someone,
don't.
you should call me.
Yeah,
no,
Yeah.
no.
again, you guys are, you're getting it. But if you were a brand new board member that didn't know how to handle this properly, okay, so like you have no idea, you're totally new, you're clueless.
To me, this is kind of customer service 101 as well, like.
Yeah, I
to
know.
some degree.
Yeah,
It
you don't
is,
go
it
right to
is.
the owner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, so, but I
Exactly.
mean, that's why it all kind
Yeah.
of makes sense. I guess I knew a little bit more than I thought I did.
you did, you have this, I'm telling you, Gary.
Just the different guys.
But the point I wanted to make is the answer to how you would handle this is in your policies. So if you go to, I don't have your policy book, but your packet, but like I would go to the board management delegation policies, right? And I would look up and say,
Yeah, BSR 4,
what is yours?
delegation to the superintendent.
Delegation to the superintendent. Yeah, the board will develop policies, to achieve specific, let's see,
No,
um,
that's the one that says basically the superintendent is responsible for all of this overseeing of the district,
Yeah.
the district, the staff, et cetera. And that we only act through him.
right, right.
Yeah.
Right. And accountability of the superintendent. The board will never give instructions to persons. I don't know if you have this. I'm guessing you probably have
Yeah.
it. The board will never give instructions to persons who report directly or indirectly the superintendent. So a brand new board member who gets caught wouldn't go, I gotta call the principal. And tell the principal they need to handle this situation.
Yeah.
Like, so
Which definitely could happen.
which could happen.
Oh, yeah.
Again, a well-meaning board member who wants to help, your neighbor, you want to look like you're fixing it, but you can't. You have to be faithful to what your policies are saying.
I mean, that was laid out initially for me to let me know that, you can't, tell a teacher or administrator what to do. Pretty much Tom's the point of contact.
Yep,
So, and that all makes sense.
Yeah.
it makes good sense. Yeah. It just keeps the roles and the responsibilities clear. That's what I think is so wonderful about it. Yeah, so let's see, how are we doing in time? I need to wrap up.
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Do you want to do a different rehearsal? This one is, this is gonna apply to you guys in a year. Can you read it? The board has hired a new
Oh,
CEO.
boy,
They are pleased with their appointments,
or they can't wait.
but they're concerned about their lack of previous CEO experience. The
Oh.
board decides that in order to give their new CEO a good start and themselves assurance that all is well, they should form a subcommittee or a committee to advise the CEO for at least their first 6 months in the role. Is that,
Danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson.
Danger.
now why is that not advisable?
What was it, Dr. Smith?
Yeah,
Well, if you've hired somebody to come in, here's my spiel, I've used it since
Yeah.
we started. You guys know what I'm gonna
Mhm.
say. If you've hired somebody that met all your expectations or the majority of them when you're doing the interview process,
Right,
then you let them do their job.
right,
If they have a question, they can come to
Mhm.
whoever they need to go find out a question.
Yeah.
We're not gonna micromanage
no,
someone that is probably got more degrees, well, maybe not more than you or you, but more than me.
at least in education. more
There
than
you
it's in
go.
education,
That-
right?
And they've done this probably before.
Mhm.
Right,
Oh, sorry. And let them do their job.
right,
I mean, if we have to micromanage them, then we hired the wrong person to begin with.
Indeed.
Or we need to step back and look at what we're doing.
Well, the chain of command just becomes confusing for the.
Yeah.
listener.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that hourglass that you showed us,
Yeah.
is an
Yeah.
offshoot or two.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
I,
Well, and it's
as I
hard.
put it, to paraphrase, many years ago when I first talked to Tom, it was, I'm not going to do your job. If you don't do your job, I will fire you.
There you go.
yeah,
That's
because,
it, yeah.
I mean, you say that tongue in cheek, but he's ultimately.
No, that was, I was very
accountable.
serious.
Yeah,
Well, and it's very hard, you know, in my role, and part of why I wanted to do this is for the new person. In a year, you know, next 6 months will be looking,
yep,
and they need to know if your policy governance that you're following.
Yeah.
They wanna know, like, that's what you're doing, okay?
Mhm.
So, you know, I go around operating under this, and then if the board's like in a different place, it makes it really hard to run the place.
sure.
Cause I don't
does.
know what's coming next, you know? I'm basing it on the policies and trying to implement them to the best of my ability and with my knowledge. But yet the board might be operating on a different sort of plane.
Yeah,
It's like, that's terrible.
that's.
You know, even, and I have no problem explaining what I did and how I followed the policy and why I did what I did. But,
Mhm.
you know, it's gonna be one way or the other, because it's just unnerving.
This doesn't mean we can't find fault with the
Exactly, like,
superintendents,
and you've
but
done.
we have
yeah.
done that on occasion.
Yeah,
But we have to say, okay, let us clarify the policy, work through that way. It's not, well, I'm gonna go in and do this now.
Yeah.
No, it's still his job. We just want him to do it differently.
yeah.
Yeah, we might have to change the policy.
Yeah.
Or
Or
the
say,
interpretation
I
of the
think
policy.
you didn't implement the policy
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And he could be out of compliance.
Yeah.
And there's
Could be.
nothing wrong with that. In fact, I've seen superintendents who report non-compliance. As long as there's a plan on how you're gonna
Right.
move
Yeah,
into
yeah, back in.
compliance,
Yeah.
then you're okay.
Yeah.
And so this is a dangerous situation because it kind of violates the position of the board
Mhm.
and that whole board, that you really, under policy governance, don't need to have a subset of your board, you know, like the committees, we can have committees, but you have to be very clear. This is not the way to get assurance that the CEO is doing their job right. How do you get assurance from your
Right.
CEO that they're doing their job correctly? How do you get that assurance is my question.
Will you
Through
ask,
the
yeah,
monitoring
you
reports,
ask for a
right?
monitoring report or you explanation of how is your actions fitting within our policies?
And I always like this too, is that the board may also wish to reset their monitoring schedule. So when you get your new CEO, if you just can't keep up with the policy monitoring because they're still learning policy governance, then that's okay. Just tweak your policy monitoring schedule. So you don't slow down, take a breath, make sure that your new CEO has the knowledge and the skill, not the skills, because that takes time, but at least give them enough information and knowledge to set them up for success. Because that's one of the vulnerabilities of the system, I think, is when you have a strong policy governance board and a CEO who's clueless about policy governance, or the vice versa. And so when you do hire your new CEO, make sure that they get policy governance training and get a policy governance coach.
Yeah.
And have them, that coach work with the new CEO for at least a year like Jeannie Collins would be a perfect coach to work with.
And not one of us,
Huh?
and not one of us to be a coach.
No, like somebody,
Outside, yeah,
an outside
right.
coach who could really, work with your new CEO, because that would be, helping you to set them up for success. You don't want that unequal,
Yeah.
abilities. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what that says right there, right?
Mhm.
And really, it's your job as the board to ensure that your CEO is fully aware of what policy governance is, and that they have that knowledge to be successful. So that's, we could spend hours. So my suggestion to all of you would be, keep practicing these policies, keep doing your policy report, monitoring reports, pull them out of your consent agenda, spend the meat of your meetings if you can on the policy monitoring reports. When you hire a new CEO, make sure they get their training, have a coach for them. I feel like you're on the right track. You're doing it really well, and you have a policy monitoring schedule. Get Garrett trained. I sent you, maybe, I'm not sure, this
Yeah,
group
you
called
sent me
Out
a
of
lot
Canada,
of
Brown Dog Consulting. She has an online module. It's so good. It's called Board Accelerator, and it's a self-paced course. Actually, you all could take it. It's like $400, $300 if you have more than 5 people take it. So it's not expensive. Self-paced. She goes into each of those principles in detail. It's a great way just to get the foundation of what policy governance is as a new board member. That would be worth looking into for everybody. I just took it again, just to kind of keep my.
I think the stuff that the School Board Association has available is actually a pretty good resource.
We don't have much anymore.
But,
of
okay,
policy
really,
governance.
okay.
There's just a
It
little
used to
bit.
be a good bit. And it
Well,
was
we used to
helpful.
have Val Gardner, who we
Yeah,
lost, and so we don't have her anymore, but we do have a little bit in our essentials book for school boards.
All right.
And then I've kind of become the de facto expert, but I don't feel comfortable being called the policy governance expert. I love it, and I think I love talking to boards about it. But what I'd like to do too is, I run a program called Policy Governance Maintenance for boards and superintendents. It's a 6-month program. We're running it. Jim Salzgiver's part of that. VRSU is doing it. Winooski's on part of that cohort, Essex Westford. We want to run it again in the fall. Think about it for your board, because it's for the superintendent and the board. We start off with an in-person all-day workshop, just kind of reviewing what policy governance is. And then we meet once a month online, and we have a topic that's determined by the cohort. So that, like, tomorrow we have our last virtual meeting, and people are saying, we need help with superintendent evaluation in a policy governance system. So that's what we're focusing on.
Might want to do that once we have the new superintendent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wrote it down.
I mean, when will you get your new superintendent? So
Yeah.
you have somebody,
No,
Oh.
no.
but whenever you hire that person, make sure that they get the foundational stuff
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
Before you put them in the deep end, because this
Yeah.
program does presume some knowledge.
Yeah.
Already, so I actually asked for 2 years of experience with policy governance to take the program.
And Jim Salinger's on it?
Yeah, Jim, BRSU, the whole BRSU board's doing it, the Winooski board, Essex Westford's doing it, Mount Mansfield's doing it, and
Wow.
Orange Southwest. They're all doing it, and it's been really interesting, and I think it's been very helpful. Because they learn from each other so much too, right? Let me give you that and that. All right, guys, thank you so much. I don't want to
Thank you.
hold you up. I know you have a meeting. Was this helpful at all?
I think so, yes.
I mean, I feel like we just, again, skimmed everything fast, but
The big stuff.
it is.
And 2 hours is not an enormous amount of time.
In fact,
We just wanted to kind of get started on.
yeah, no, but you guys are doing, I mean, you're really doing well. You're a high functioning board. In fact, I hope you do the policy maintenance program, because I would enjoy having you there,
That would
teaching
be a
other
good
people
one
how to
to do.
do it.
That
Yeah,
would be a good one. I wrote it down too.
Yeah, especially when they're a new person. Yeah,
and we'll run it probably twice a year for a while, so
Mhm.
even if you like wanted to do it next year, this coming fall, you could do it, and then when your new superintendent comes in a year, you might have new board members too at that time. Is this mine or yours?
It can be yours.
It's yours.
Surely.
Oh, it can be yours.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna grab a sandwich for the
5
road, is that okay?
For the
Yeah,
audience, we're gonna
definitely.
take a short break. And then we'll
Yeah.
be back.
For your meeting.
Yeah.
Welcome back. And welcome to all of our students and teachers. We have, are we gonna do this right this minute, Tom? Right now? Go right into public comments?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so we'll go right into public comments and, how about if we have each of you introduce yourselves? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Sure. Hi, I'm Molly Armbrust, your pronouns, from West Hartford, Vermont. And yeah, coming here with this group to sort of talk about the letter about Palestine. Yeah.
I'm Liam Mangieri, 11th grade, pronouns they, them, and I'm talking about the letter too.
I'm Alex Holtquist. I'm in 10th grade. My pronouns are also they, them. And yeah, here to talk about the same thing.
My name is Nicole Huesman. I'm also in 11th grade and my pronouns are she, them. I'm here to also discuss the topic of Palestine. My name is Julia Anderson. My pronouns are she, they. I am couple roles. I'm an elementary school teacher at Ottauquechee School. I am an equity liaison for the school district. I'm advisor for the high school and OQS BIPOC affinity groups. And today I'm also here by request as a student liaison for this topic. And yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you for having us today.
Someone's hiding in the back.
Hi, my name is Christina Dillon. I'm a reporter with the Valley Police.
Well, we've all got our names in front of us, so, how do we want to handle this? Just turn it over to the students?
Yeah, well,
We'll listen?
the students, with, Ms. Anderson's help, came to me and, wanted to talk about, the world politics and what's going on in Gaza, and, had a lot of concerns about it, and, we talked for a little bit on Monday. Jesus, seems like a week ago, but it was 2 days ago, Monday, and, I encouraged them to come to the board meeting and voice their concerns and, see what the board was willing to do and say. We sort of agreed on the letter that I put in your packet late today, that's in the board packet. But I just wanted you all to talk about it and add whatever you want, and maybe some other requests or, asks,
And
right? Am I?
they had a chance to look at your letter, Tom?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I would
They
say
have
that I
chance
would
to-
love,
okay.
to take this time to maybe read through it as a group and make sure that everything that, the students want included is included. And I know that there's a few small action items outside of that, but I think that we've for the most part taken care of that, which is creating a safe space going forward for them to discuss this, which I think we've already taken care of. And we're gonna organize, to start within the next couple weeks. But I think that might be a great starting point. It's just to hear it again, hear the words. And I think we talked about how this would be a staff facing message. And then we'd like to continue dialogue about potentially community facing message. Of course, we will, want to notify families about the staff facing message. And so we would be happy to partner with you guys, to continue to figure out, how to communicate this as it moves forward, as we start to open up, safe spaces to have these discussions, to educate.
It's Tom Burnett.
I think he was getting a copy of the letter. He thought it might be in the packet, but it's not.
It's not, okay, just make Tom's gonna get some more copies. Have you got copies yourselves?
I have an electronic copy here, so I'm happy to read it out if you need to.
He is.
There's a whole bunch. Maybe you can pass those to your left and those to your right. We'll all be good.
Copy of your own work.
I need it.
Well, Tom, since it's got your signature at the bottom, would you like to read it out loud?
Want me to read it?
Sure.
Unless one of you want to read it. I'm happy to do it. Dear all, for anyone with a connection to Palestine or Israel, the past months have been especially hard. The continued unrest, both abroad and close to home, have made it more obvious that the violence will come to us whether we want to ignore it or not. Contrary to what we are told, it is not complex. Violence and the violation of human rights are much simpler than many people in the US portray them to be. And as educators, we must resist the temptation to intellectualize things that are straightforward. This means not being afraid of creating welcoming dialogical spaces for students, even when they are not apparently interested in engaging at first. It also means not using the excuse of not being experts on the matter in order to avoid a difficult discussion because we are afraid of making a mistake. All students in the district have the right to call for a ceasefire in response to the violence they are witnessing. As a district, we have made a commitment to anti-racism. It is in moments like these when our students and colleagues could use the space, or at least the acknowledgement that things are not okay around them. I will be the first to invite you to make exceptions to the lesson or unit plan to have worthy conversations like these, even if they only focus on how the students are feeling at this moment in relation to local incidents. This does not need to only happen during things like advisories or during humanities. As adults, we are tasked with modeling anti-racism, belonging, and emotional safety in whichever capacity we exist within the community. If you have done something that has worked well for you and your students, please share it with a colleague. Administrators or groups of educators may choose to approach some of this collaboratively. Several of our colleagues in the district are mental health professionals, counselors, social workers, or experienced with dialogical methods that can provide some guidance when needed and direct support for students. I am also, as our fellow administrators and our equity committee, happy to accompany you with anything you may want to try if you are not sure. Most importantly, a fundamental tenet in justice work is to remove ourselves from the center. It is not about you or me when families still do not know about the fate of a loved one, or when a child is literally dying from unnatural wounds as I type this email. Let us all remain watchful of our positional power, process our inner contradictions with humility, and remain aware of our privilege as we guide students of color and students and support communities familiar with deep trauma that many of us will never understand. So, this was a draft, much of it is borrowed and, used from a colleague, so I should, make note of that. Julia and all the kids prepared it, with some input from me, so.
You guys wanna add anything or talk about anything, now that we've reread the letter?
I guess I definitely wanted to bring up a point that even though many people would view this as a political issue, it is not political if it's involving human rights. And it's definitely in line with our district's commitment to equity and our anti-racism policy. So it's very much aligned with what we already have a commitment to do.
Yeah, and I guess I just also, I think it's kind of somewhat been said, but like, this is a significant sort of global event that's happening, and so I feel like a school is a place of education. Like, I feel like it is kind of the responsibility of schools to sort of help students understand and process and learn about this. And then I guess the sort of use of this letter is, it seems like there's potentially some uncertainty around like the ability to do that. So this is kind of a way to just sort of release some of that and support teachers and having those conversations and really making sure that people can learn about this in sort of a productive and useful way in the school setting. So, yeah. And I think that most of our kind of points have been brought up in other,
I'd say in many spaces, this feels like an elephant in the room. And I think that a lot of people have the desire to discuss it, or at least I think that, one of my favorite quotes that I've held on to this year is that grief is evidence of love. And I've rarely seen people even grieving. And I think that makes it hard to enter spaces, to wonder why this is not a space where we can process emotions. as someone who cares for students and like wants to sort of nurture and grow, I hate to see them stifling these feelings in order to push through the day, especially when we are teaching them and equipping them with knowledge to make the world a better place, and then we don't let them use it, is a pattern that I'm seeing repeated both at universities and at grade levels. So just seeing how passionate that they've been and how much work they've done outside of school to self-educate on this matter and be advocates for students globally, for children globally, is really inspiring. And I think that we have to follow their lead now, and let them set the tone and let them and hear them when they say that they want to learn more, and that they want to be more engaged in the world around them, that they want to make a difference in the world around them. And so, yeah, I love this letter. I've loved it since the first time I read it, when it was shared with me at a teach-in for Palestine. And I had the privilege of being surrounded by a lot of other teachers from all over Vermont and New Hampshire that were putting their heads together to figure out how to get this information out in a safe and culturally responsive way, so that it was no longer something that was like tucked into a corner. Right. So yeah, really excited about this.
Any comments, any questions for the board?
Well, I have thoughts. So, as a school district, it is our function to educate, and part of education, as you pointed out, is to allow discussion of the world in which you inhabit. Therefore, it is entirely appropriate that you have these conversations. That is not, however, the same thing as saying that the school district is taking sides. We are providing a space in which you can engage in this conversation in a way that is heartfelt, respectful, and non-disruptive to the main function of this district, which is to carry out education of our community. And within that context, this is entirely appropriate and welcome.
Awesome. Well, do you have any plans on anything else that you want to do along these lines? Have you got some future plans made out there?
Yeah.
Would you share them?
We have a few events planned. Personally, I'm planning an event that would be sort of an in-school field trip where we would have some people who are more knowledgeable about Palestinian history come in and just provide the basic history of what has happened, and then give space for discussions about the history and questions about what happened. And I know, Molly, you're also trying to get together some sort of workshop.
Yeah, not like super directly, sort of in the path of this, but it's kind of will intersect.
Yeah.
But yes, there's some workshops on sort of the process of activism and how to sort of engage in activism, which is somewhat connected to this, but also somewhat separate. And then also just kind of, so there's gonna be, this more organized sort of education, field trip sort of thing happening. And then we are sort of informally forming as a group, and then that, we're hoping to, to do this specifically, but we're hoping that that will sort of continue to be sort of an ongoing space, both for processing and then potential action, as that kind of comes up and is needed. So those are kind of the main things for now. But I also just really think that this is wanting to open it up in the classroom setting, like in the school generally, but specifically kind of targeting the classroom setting where it's felt pretty absent for the last bunch of months. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know that I'm planning as well to reach out to a lot of really knowledgeable people, more knowledgeable than myself, that work at Dartmouth, that are community educators, to see if they'll also come in and support these students. And yeah, like we are planning that safe space them after school. And then when it comes to like in the classroom. You know, I've been working over the past months to collect educational materials that meet entry points for all of our students. As an elementary school teacher, I think about how we can talk just about like what the entry points are for young children, which are basic tenets of like how to treat others, right? If I took your things, how would that make you feel? Or if I said that I was, you know, that this was my classroom and only my classroom and no one could come in, how would that make you feel, right? So finding entry points, for children and also acknowledging that some children are not hidden from the news, are not hidden from these images, and that we might have to do some significant like trauma responding to some of these kids who don't know how to make sense of what they're seeing on the television or what they're seeing on Instagram or TikTok. And just being able to finally articulate this in this letter, I think gives teachers the permission when they hear a child bring it into the space. You know, I saw this on my mom's phone, or I saw this on, you know, my own desktop, like how we can pause and be like, that's, you know, horrifying. And like, yeah, like, let's talk about how that made you feel. And let's talk about, at the very least, you know, do you think that anyone should ever have to experience that, including you? Like, do you think that any of us, as humans, what type of world do you want to build, right? I think at the end of the day, that is the question that we want to prepare them to answer. And so, yeah, as I think about entry points, for all teachers and thinking about how to advise teachers as an equity liaison, I've put like a lot of thought and care into it. So I think there'll be some events, like formal events. I think there'll be informal gatherings, again, to share emotions, share knowledge, to share literature. Big fan of literature. And then to also just, yeah, again, those small moments in class where at the very least we can acknowledge the feelings in the room. And just do that caring. Yeah.
Have you thought about how you will deal, with some of this information that you're gonna be sharing with students and with adults? If that sets off some triggers for that person, will your teachers have some kind of mini training to know how to deal with if it sets off a trigger of a child or two, or even a parent when you're talking to the parents or to other staff members?
I'm hoping that just the release of this letter will allow us to and allow administrators as well to take some time out, you know, out of our staff. I mean, we get minimum 15 minutes each staff meeting in order to address equity issues of all kinds. So maximizing that time. I have, like I said, materials that I have to already share out with my colleagues in my school, and I'd be happy to share them out with the district. I think that we have a lot of teachers who are already really educated on the subject, and honestly, I'd like to like release them, make them feel safe in order to use their like immense knowledge of history, civil rights, right? Because I think, like I said, people have been unsure whether or not they would be safe by just simply having these conversations in a neutral and objective way. Objective. And so I want we have people who are so knowledgeable about it, and it's so exciting. And so, yeah, just giving them permission to use that skill and use that knowledge. I think that we can very quickly start to create spaces where we can advise teachers, where we can receive questions. And also I think always, and this is something we've talked about as an equity committee this year, is also giving teachers permission to be co-learners alongside their students. I think that is a beautiful thing. And like giving them permission to say, I don't know this yet, but here's how we can find out. Or here's a lot of information that we have. The same way that you would write an essay, the same way that you would do research. How do we cross-reference these things? How do we make sure that the information that we're getting is objective? And so I think even doing that together, right? You're learning the process of being a scholar. So it really is actually a fantastic opportunity to figure out, how do we solve problems as a community? How do we solve problems together, like collaboratively? And I just think that it's okay for teachers to also be able to say, I don't know yet, or this seems like it might have been hurtful to you, like, let's hold space for your feelings now, and then let me go and get information and bring it back to you tomorrow, right? I think we need to be more comfortable with doing that, because I definitely don't have all the answers now. I don't know if I ever will to anything, right? But I do have a desire to learn, and I do have a desire, to learn alongside my students and expand and just be the best citizens and humans that we can be. So I do think it's an exciting opportunity. I think that when we think of it through that lens, rather than expecting teachers to come in with a lecture or with, you know, like, oh, well, I learned everything about this last night and now I'm ready to teach you. I don't think that that's the expectation at all. I think at first, right, we want to start with just doing that immediate, like, emotional, like, caretaking, and then all begin to take time to grow our knowledge both together and independently as we have time.
If I may, go ahead.
I was just gonna jump in, like, just to add to that, I love like everything you said. We are also kind of trying to get into one of, like, as some students, get into one of the faculty meetings, ahead of the sort of more organized event. To sort of make sure that all teachers are on, to some level, kind of prepared for that and, have some skills to.
Some of the teachers may have problems talking about it themselves.
Right, so I guess like this meeting would be sort of a time to try and address that with the whole community. And then also pulling on the resources that we have from those teachers who are really prepared and ready to have these conversations. So. for
We
sure.
want to create safe spaces for teachers as well to unpack those feelings, right? So at every single level, we want to be opening up dialogue. So if teachers need to, like, share their feelings, or unpack, like, we've all been taught different things. We've all been taught similar things. Ultimately, we've all been taught under the American public education system for the most part. So, like, you know, we all have unpacking to do all of the time. You know, I can reflect myself on things that I've learned about the civil rights movement, about segregation, that I, like, had to relearn, or learn more, right? We learn about presidents. We don't learn about some of their less glamorous qualities, right? So I think, I mean, we've had the book forever. Was it Lies? My history teacher told me.
Lies, my teacher told me.
That's what she told me, which in earnest are never lies when they're taught, right? It's reteaching of information that's been taught generation after generation. But I do also know, from a justice standpoint, that it's not always the people who are oppressed that get to create those narratives and to create those books. So always opening up and holding space for people that have not gotten to tell their stories, I think is really important. And also acknowledging that we have children, students in those demographics of people who have not gotten to tell their stories, and who very much need to do so, because I think that when we make a place that is good for everybody, including the most marginalized of us, it helps all of us.
If I may then, in welcoming this dialogue, I am asking you as a member of this board to do so in a responsible way. There will be people who will have different ideas about this than you do, different understandings, different conclusions. The tragedy of the Middle East, as it was the tragedy of Ireland and elsewhere, is that both sides always end up treating the other side as if they're not human. Please remember that tragedy and avoid it. So just because somebody disagrees with you, they're not necessarily evil. They're just disagreeing with you. And by bringing forth the fact and engaging in this conversation, I hope that we as a community can avoid some of that tendency to try to deal with people who have different opinions as if they are subhuman, less than human, or just plain evil.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from a personal place, like all discussions of everything should like hold the humanity of everyone involved sort of in the foreground. And so like, I would very much hope to see that happen. And
it's not easy,
as we're,
which takes maturity to do.
right,
And so,
and some of opening this up is not every conversation. The more you talk, the more conversations that like, you know, will happen, and not all of those will be facilitated, and not all of those will even be facilitated with skill. So there is like, I guess, some risk in harm happening, and I think we need to take that risk because I think it ultimately gets us somewhere to discuss this, and there's a harm that is happening by not having these conversations too. So I very much
I
hope to
agree.
see like them approached with sort of humanity as sort of the focus. And that's what I would want to bring forward as we're like talking to faculty and things like that, for sure. And that doesn't mean that it's always gonna happen, so that's why we need to keep working towards it.
I think it's great that you're trying, because a lot of the times, all these subjects that tend to be very polarized, conversations don't happen. And then just hate brews on either side.
Right.
So it's great that you're trying to have a conversation that would include anybody, which can be tough when you hear things that you don't agree with, and when then other people hear things they don't agree with, so.
I think that, I've worked to collect, narratives and, literature, as a big fan, from people who have experienced this conflict from all sides of it. And I think that a lot of it kind of does come to a beautiful point. And so I think by analyzing all of it and seeing people's journeys, entering the space from multiple sides and then realizing collective humanity in that process, like there are already so many beautifully facilitated conversations and Q&As that have been done, like nationally and internationally, that we can also bring into the space, right? When it's hard for us to have those conversations, there are people that have already had them. So then to also be able to view those, to view the tension, to view the disagreements, and to watch them be repaired, we can also learn from observing others doing that difficult work, because so much work has already been done. And that is a beautiful thing. So I don't want us to feel like we are reinventing the wheel here necessarily. We have so much to draw from. There are there's some documentaries that I really love to have like public screenings of, just like for people, again, it's opt-in, right? We're not making anybody learn anything, but I'd like to have things that are publicly accessible to people, from again, different entry points into the same conflict. Because, yeah, I don't know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel is all I'm saying.
I just want to say thank you for another thing you said. You said that you want to teach everyone how to be scholars, which I find is very important. It's very easy to find any information. We're cursed by knowledge, right? We can find any information we want to back up anything that we believe.
Yes.
But teaching people how to sift through the misinformation and disinformation is extremely important. So I'm glad that you said that.
One of my good friends, told me that we need to teach the students of now discernment more than anything.
Yes.
So the more that we can include discernment in our curriculum, I
When I
think,
was in school, it was tough to find information,
yeah.
and now it's not at all. So,
Now ChatGPT can tell you anything about it.
Well, I will go forward. I feel like I should ask Wilmer in Winooski if some of that was his work or some of it was someone else's.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm appropriately citing whoever,
Of course.
whatever sources came together for you to all prepare this, you know?
And I was given
Well,
permission to use it as a template, but I would love that also just to reach out and I think to have solidarity among
Yeah.
superintendents
Yeah.
as well. I think it would be great to also build that
It's
support
a letter
system.
that everyone should send, but I don't want to claim that it's entirely.
Of
mine.
course, of course.
I want to make sure that if Wilmer did the majority, he should.
Yeah, and then,
'Cause
I
it's
also,
beautiful. He did a great job.
no,
Or
it was
whoever
really
did.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I also think that it would be productive, probably following this to, gather admin, like thinking principals, right? As like the second step of like, how do we then prepare principals ahead of our staff meetings, right? And these are things that me and the rest of my equity committee are like really happy and excited, to help support and facilitate. But just thinking right about those next steps. So this letter goes out. I think it needs to go out as soon as possible. I don't think that we need to wait on any of that to do this because at the end of the day, right, the first thing that this does is release people to talk about their feelings. And then we can get to, start to break down those technical, dissemination of information, guidance, just like advice and like reassurance for teachers. But yeah, this is a fantastic start.
Yeah.
You sure those parents too.
Yes,
That's gonna be a big one.
As a community member and just having gone through the bond process, I think the biggest complaint that we're hearing, not just from parents, but from the general community, is that they find out about things through misinformation, right? They get half a story on Facebook or whatever. And so I would really encourage also to do a more community focused, a why. You're never gonna get a agreement from everyone, but if you get ahead of the why, there's so much less drama on the
Yeah.
other side of it. So that would just be my, this is amazing and I'm so proud of you guys, but I do wanna say that like, I strongly encourage it to be not just parents.
Right, oh,
So
yeah, I
we-
agree.
Yeah, we've certainly been talking about that, and we kind of had talked about having this more faculty, like facing letter, and then sending
Sure.
a more sort of community focused one.
And that can happen like very rapidly.
Yes,
I
for
think
sure.
really, I mean, it's a, 1 to 2 paragraphs at most, and me and my colleagues would be happy to draft that for you as well. But essentially, this, and you can even literally add this letter, this is the letter that we are sending to staff. This is how it pertains back to our equity policy. We are aware of the fact that our students, most of them have access to technology, have access to this. And, I mean, if you're seeing what they're seeing, I don't know how many of your Instagram reel algorithms are set to world politics, but like, I wouldn't want any of my students or any of my children to be seeing that and not having a space,
Yeah.
to discuss that. So I think like the words are really that simple. And that's something that we can get out by end of week, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we need that to happen within, the 24 to 72 hours, if this is being released, I think that's absolutely feasible. And I think that we can, even whether it's send out a poll or just give out a time for community to come and gather, I think that's maybe something that we can, because I want, admin to be prepared and present for that ideally, but, and I would like to consult, with the committee, but like, having a space as soon as possible for the community to come, or at least until then, a virtual space for them to start to submit questions and concerns that they have, which is as simple as a Google, poll. So those are actions that we can take pretty immediately and then build from there.
Thanks for coming. I know it's late, but
Thanks for making space for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Would we be comfortable with releasing this letter tomorrow and then,
yeah, I just think I want some, I want to credit whoever had some.
oh, yeah, no, take your time with that. Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or if you have that, just send it to me.
Yeah.
Or I already asked for.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. It's the original author. I know it's been doctored a million times. and We did our own tweaks.
Yeah, no, I just forgot about that. That sounds great. So as soon as we get the thumbs up from him.
Yeah.
We can release that, and then I will get racing, to get that community facing letter out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's just
So-
really, really impressive. Really impressive. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Lots of courage, lots of strength. Lots of commitment there.
Awesome. Thanks for
Thank
making
you.
space for us.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Drive careful.
Have a great rest of your evening. Yeah.
He probably had lawyers and.
Oh, Sherry's hand is up.
Sharon?
We have a hand.
Oh, okay.
Is it pertaining to this?
Maybe you want to.
No, it was up before, I mean, I can't
Oh, it was
say
up
100%,
Yeah.
but it was up before he started speaking.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
you, guys.
you.
Thanks. All right. Hello? Sometimes they forget to put the hand down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Dude.
The hand went down, yeah.
All right.
It changed names and it was weird.
No, I think, is Jacob Hazina in the,
He
he should be upgraded to a panelist. He wants to talk about something quick.
Is it under the consent agenda or something else? This is.
It's on the agenda. There's two things.
Yeah,
And they're
okay.
both in your packet, but one is the food service contract renewal and the other is financial control.
Okay.
And then we can. Do that.
Is.
Hello, Jake.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? Sorry to keep you
Good.
waiting.
No worries. Busy night. So I have two things for the board tonight. The first is our food service renewal. I just got this from Abbey Group a couple days ago, and I wanted to bring this before the board because you all have to approve our renewal per our renewal. I had estimated and budgeted 3%, because that was what Abbey Group had originally quoted me on. But because of the financials and everything, things are going fairly well in Hartford. So it actually came in at a 2% increase. So I just looking to get approval from the board to renew with Abbey Group for another year.
Do I have a motion?
Move that we approve the renewal of the food service contract.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, there's the first one. What's next?
Okay, the second item I have for you is the internal financial controls checklist. This is a statutory requirement for 16 VSA 242A. That basically just says, we file this checklist annually, and we have the board sign off on it. Not really any changes from when I presented this to you last year, but the two things that I always highlight. The first is, our check's always written out to a specified payee and not to cash. And I said, no, the only way that happens is when we have petty cash. That's the only time checks are made out to cash. And then the other item that I wanted to just highlight was, have you experienced a theft or embezzlement during the last 5 years? Yes. Back in 22, we had a former custodian that got into some of the Sunshine and Coke machine money at the high school. But when we found out about it, we took immediate action to change our processes of how we hold money and how we handle money. We've improved it since then. So if there's any other questions about the internal control sheet, I'm happy to hear those.
Tom, do we need a motion to accept that?
Yeah, you do.
We'll have a motion to accept the internal financial controls checklist for schools.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Consent agenda?
yeah, want me to keep running?
Sure.
All right, well, like we talked about at our last meeting, at the end of April, we, talked about the, bond steering committee, the FY 25 bond steering committee. Sarah Campbell, was appointed the chair of that committee, so Sarah and I have met, and we've discussed, getting a, document together that sort of drafts, the charge and the structure of the committee, the voting members of the committee and the advisory or liaison committee members and the selection process. So that was all in your packet, and, I don't know how much detail you want to go over. If you've read it, I'm great with that. If you want me to go over any specific part or why we came up with the voting members we did, happy to do that. Yeah, just want to know your thoughts. Any other?
No, I feel, I feel good about where we landed, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The one question I had is, why is a member of the school director, school boards, a liaison member rather than a voting member? And I don't know that there's a right answer, I just want to know your logic.
My logic behind it was I'm hoping to get most of this work done this summer. And I'd like to, not slow it down to the board schedule. And then if you entrust us to come up with that RFP and that request, then we can bring it back to you at your first board meeting in August. We also would welcome a board member to be, on the committee, but I really do wanna try to be relatively nimble and not follow a 2-week, an alternating 2-week pattern, if that is at all possible.
We also thought that the board committee member, if they were a voting member of the committee, then they're sort of getting 2 votes.
True.
They're sitting on the committee and voting and approving things on the committee, and then the matters that go to the board, like the RFP or hiring a firm, they're sort of doing it twice.
Well, I was on the board, I was part of the committee that did the Wilder School, there's the chair of that committee. So I don't necessarily think that that is true, because I think it worked. I was just wanting to I wasn't gonna argue against it.
No, I would appreciate
yeah.
the
It also
conversation.
makes more space
Yeah.
for others that aren't involved, and I don't mean that in a negative
No,
way.
you want it smaller.
We went back and forth on this. We tried to stay between 7 and 9, and what was our biggest number was 14,
Yeah.
like including everyone we thought would be the right group, right?
Yeah, we
And then
never,
we had to start narrowing down, like,
sure.
and that's why we ended up with staff and not a teacher from each area. Like, we wanna make sure that that all staff understand that they're welcome to participate, you know what I mean? And making sure that we had secondary and primary,
Yeah, but when we tried to get every stakeholder group.
it was like
just
14.
Last
We
week,
really feel like we need to turn this around this summer,
Really fast.
so that, cause it's kind of the foundation of the whole bond. Other than that regulatory and safety stuff that we know have to get done, sort of the $6 million piece.
the chimney cement fall
Yeah,
down.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, those are things we're not really gonna discuss at the steering
Yeah.
committee, but these are the things like, what do we wanna do with our buildings? Are we changing the configurations in buildings?
Right.
Do we need to build something? Do we need to rent something? Do we need to tear something down?
The other thing I'd like clarification on is how are the staff representatives being?
Yeah, well,
selected for?
there's actually a form in here, in your packet, that we were gonna send out to everyone. So everybody would have to apply, other than the superintendent and probably HSD administrator.
Right.
Seeking applicants for the town of Hartford, from the town of Hartford, to serve on the FY 25 school facilities planning committee. So basically, all of those groups would have to submit a letter outlining the reasons for your interest in serving,
Great.
your experience, and whether you have knowledge of school facility construction or renovation by May 17th. And again, it was in an effort to sort of like move this thing, because we have a lot of work to do this summer. So that's what that is.
My only thing is, I really hope that, we fill all the seats on the committee first. But in terms of like the parent caregiver community members, I would hope that it doesn't end up just being 2 community members without any kids in the school, that end up as kind of a community member.
We'll speak out loud that
But I know that
I
you're
have
there.
them, you know what I mean? So I'm at least representing that.
Okay.
I do, and obviously there'll be letters of interest, but I have heard interest from other parents
Great.
already. That they're, we could convene a board of 40 and with the interest level that's out there. And I'm hoping that we get people to participate,
Yeah, and I'm not saying I don't want a community member that doesn't have children.
Of course,
in the
of
school
course.
as well, because I think that's an important viewpoint to have.
Yeah.
But I especially being a parent, would
Yeah.
love it that there's a parent, that there's you as well, which is great.
Yeah, and
And
I
I-
think the other thing I wanna mention for sure is that this isn't where it like sort of begins and ends. This group is charged with making sure the community is informed about what we're doing too.
Yeah.
So when we're doing the RFP and when we hire a firm, that firm, one of the things that we're asking is that they do community forums to solicit, Hartford residents' input on catchment, on the, enrollment and what to do about it, every step of the way, as much as we can and still move forward.
And I have talked informally with Scott about, Parks and Rec being, they're a key stakeholder. The amount of shared services that we have it's a lot. And we want to make sure we're taking their accounts, their needs into account as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I mean, the other liaisons to the committee too are Jonathan Garthwaite, the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and Jacob. But again, in the past, we've done things in that we've been criticized for having sort of a district administration heavy committee. And
Yeah, and my reasoning behind that was Jonathan and Jacob have to be integral players in it
Yeah.
anyway, right?
Mhm.
So we wouldn't want that, I mean, we don't wanna hinder them or slow them down or do anything like that, so they're basically would be advisors to us, our main advisors, when working in this work.
Yeah.
When doing this work, I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the thing we haven't outlined is like, at what key points will we bring the decision to the school board? You know, the
Yeah,
RFP.
I think that was my first, like, establishing guideline, developing guiding principles. I really wanna talk about with them, like, I want us, or I want the board to set that first deadline, right? I really want an RFP by August first. But I also want this committee to develop what other kind of points we think we wanna hit, so that we're setting a reasonable expectation, but we also have a obligation, a report back obligation.
Yeah.
You know, and I put in here, we are obligated to report to you at least quarterly or at any significant milestone.
When is the bond signed and issued?
Yeah,
July
that's what-
1st,
That's
right?
what we're working on right now.
Okay,
We
because,
actually trying to go to the bond bank by the end of this month.
so my thought about the issuance of the RFP is it should not happen before the bond is
Oh.
actually done.
No.
So I would
Yeah.
use that as the trigger date.
Yeah.
And I have no problem, once it's signed, you can go out that day or the next day, but I would say do not precede the
yes.
bond.
Oh, I agree.
There is a provision in our voting paperwork that allows us to do that, but we do try to avoid it.
Yeah, so that's the one thought I have. So you've
You know,
answered
you
my
can
question.
actually make some commitments.
I
from the
understand.
proceeds Before you even have the money. We've done that
Yeah, I know,
before, but
but
we don't wanna,
I
I
don't
don't know how to do it.
And I want us to be thoughtful and fast, right? So I really feel like that first board meeting in August is a good target for here, right? We will have crossed the fiscal year, we will have committed with the bond bank, and we can post it right away.
It'll be the first board meeting in August. It's probably not
Right,
gonna be
I
the
know,
first, it's
I know.
gonna be the day.
Yeah, but if I obligate the
17th
committee
or
to have
15th
something
or-
ready to present by August first,
Yeah.
then it's in your packets, it's
Right.
public, it can be publicly
Yeah.
advertised, you know, if we wanna do it that way, so.
Doug, you've been integrally involved in all of this facilities work. Any comments?
No, I assume I'm going to continue.
There you go. I was hoping you were gonna say that.
You might have to fight everybody else's confidence.
I was gonna say, I thought it said Doug under.
That's right. That is, yeah.
All
Right,
right,
but I mean, everything is contingent on this RFP getting done for the study, so we really wanna get that done, then we could probably slow down a little.
so, I have no problems, my questions have been answered. I'd like to move that we approve this.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So will be.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome. All right, believe it or not, I thought we were done with the calendar for next year.
I knew better.
And then a couple issues came up, around people not having enough time to, get all the training done. The teachers, pre-K 8 have really found that in service, their early releases, which is amounts to about a day, an hour and a half of time, every month. And I had originally not put those in the calendar. So this calendar revision that I beg ask for your approval of, adds an early release every month. So the district training days are very different than the early releases. The early releases like really for the school to work on their program, their curriculum work. So there are 5 additional, early releases in this version of the calendar.
Are these in addition to, so I only ask about this because I have a kid in pre-K, but is this in addition to, what's it, every third Friday of the month is a pre-K?
This is instead of.
Instead of.
The Fridays are going away. Okay, this calendar has no Fridays. What we did, because one of my concerns was that disjointed pre-K on a separate sort of calendar than K-8.
Yep.
So this aligns pre-K with K-8. On the days that K-8 has an early release, pre-K, the next year would have, in-service.
Sounds good.
In the FY 26 calendar, we're gonna do away with that, and we're gonna ask that pre-K just have early releases like everyone else.
And all the pre-K teachers across the district are good with everything as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So far, so, they weren't good with the previous version of this calendar,
Okay,
because they didn't have as much time.
okay.
But the sort of the compromise was, let's move the data from Friday to Tuesdays, when everyone else has early release. We'll make it a full day for FY 25,
Sounds good.
and hopefully they're okay with FY 26 being, just the early releases and it's all synced up. That's the goal, because, as a parent, I realize how hard that must be.
Yeah, really, yeah, well, I feel like I'm slightly an exception because we still pay for daycare / after school care, so we have that backup, but next year we won't for one kid. So if one kid does not have school, it means we don't know why for us to stay home, so I feel like that's the case for most parents, so.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
on
both kids
different
are around
days.
too here.
It was gonna be on different days of the week, so it was really kind of crazy, but pre-K teachers have, and Nancy knows this, they have, regulatory, statutory requirements that they have to meet around licensing and around assessment. And so there is an added sort of requirement for those pre-K teachers to get training and have expertise in, their curriculum.
And so if this ensures that they have enough time to do
Yeah.
that and handle all their other.
Right,
things,
and still be part of the school.
Right.
Because in the past, it was like pre-K teachers were in the school, but they were sort of, their schedule was so different, they couldn't really be part of the team. So this allows for them to be part of the team and have enough time to do all their specialized training. It's very, it's tricky to align.
Pre-K is a whole different,
Well, pre-K, what essentially.
It's like a,
whole different
Essentially, they're a
ballgame.
daycare provider,
Yeah.
correct, to some degree, and you guys in the state, is that how it works?
yeah, well,
What's in
and,
wise?
yeah,
And
and
they're a teacher.
the requirements for pre-K are much more rigorous around,
Oh, yes.
facilities and everything,
And a
bathrooms
licensure can come into the school, if they have a preschool, a licensure from the state can come into the school at any time,
Yeah, and they do.
completely unannounced. And they do an inspection. And if there's a serious enough offense or enough minor offenses or not minor, but yeah, major minors. They can shut you down immediately. And then you have to call parents and say, you gotta come get your child because now, and then the school's gotta get whatever is that major offense that shut it down,
Yeah,
has to get fixed before you can open it back up.
we're really trying to get prepared too for when the legislature passes the mandatory 4-year-old, pre-K, because then they'll really be
Yeah,
aligned with K-8 and have to be, really synchronized.
it is, it's a
And I'm
whole set
assuming
of.
that after that, sometime soon, they'll mandate 3 years.
Is the mandate that you have to offer it? I'm sorry.
I'm all for it.
Is the mandate that you have to offer it, or is the mandate that parents have to go? Because that's a whole different question.
In my understanding, last year's bill that they forego, didn't implement, was that 4-year-olds would have to go.
To some form of pre-K.
Some form, I don't know how many hours or how many days, but
I don't think it'll go.
no,
Well, I mean, well,
just like kindergarten, how could it be a mandatory?
we don't have enough
4-year-old?
spots.
Yes,
Exactly,
well, that's the
right?
thing, that's why it it's my understanding why it didn't get implemented was
People
it's
waitlisting.
very costly and there aren't enough spots.
Yeah.
Cause once you
Not
do
enough
that,
teachers.
you'd have to
Yeah.
have enough spots for all the 4-year-olds to go.
I mean, and-
We don't.
I'm mostly asking because I had one kid who would have done amazing in that, and I had another kid who the structure would have been too much. He
Exactly.
needed the free play.
Right.
The
Yeah.
exploring experience, right? Not the time, it's time to put the Legos away, it's time to do the thing. So just really curious, like, we know our kid,
My
right?
understanding was gonna be mandatory.
Interesting,
Yeah.
like
And I
that's
mean-
the first year of school.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and part of the issue with it is it's so inequitable. Some
Yes,
kids get
very.
in, some don't, and it's like, so public money is paying for like our full day pre-Ks. And then kids who don't get in, they're paying on their own.
Yeah.
They're paying, it's like,
It's true, many of my neighbors.
Very-
on my road.
Well, and it
Yeah,
comes
it
to
does, and
people
daycare
get
goes till
really
5:30,
upset.
and school gets out at 3:30, and are you putting 3-year-olds on the bus?
Right.
I'm just curious.
Well, and pre-K kids can't do after school care too, which is another.
That's right.
Another.
Right, so then where's my 5 o'clock? How do I work a whole work day?
It's very, yeah, it's very complicated, so I don't know, maybe it'll.
I'm so glad I have a junior
It
and
might
all
be
this
several
sixth grade.
years before that's implemented, but
Yeah.
that is what they talked about last year.
Interesting.
And you can put pre-K kids on the school bus.
You can now?
You can.
Couldn't when Zach was eligible,
You can.
I couldn't
It's
put him in.
crazy.
Oh, I know, because even when I had the daycare, the kids were bused over to for the daycare.
I have a lot of concerns about that, because the
Oh, I have
buses, you don't need
tremendous
seatbelts on a bus because they're very safe, but that requires that you're sort of,
Sitting
you
still.
know, sitting still and you're rather confined, that's why the seats are so tight.
Yeah.
But a preschooler is not
They'll be under the
Not
seat, they'll be playing over.
constricted, they're,
Or they
So-
crawl all the way in the back and go under a seat and go to sleep because
yeah,
they're
well,
tired.
that
by
has
then.
happened.
They're ready for their nap.
That has happened.
Oh, yes, I know it has.
Disappearing children.
Yeah. And you find
They
them
fall
under a
asleep
seat,
and you don't
asleep.
find them till you,
Get
but
back to.
we're a
the
little
bus.
bit off the subject,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry,
So-
for the pre-K tangent, but
As a
it hits close.
representative of the contingent that's going to be most affected by this, I will allow you to make the motion.
But I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2024-2025 Hartford School District calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Appointments, resignations, and retirements. Anything?
Nope, I didn't know if there was any board committee reports, probably not, but.
Oh, I
um,
skipped right over that, didn't I?
I gotta, well, Doug and I have a couple things. We got to chat today, which is good. Doug, do you want me to share
Go ahead.
some of the stuff that I'm kind of excited to, I guess, ask what you guys think? I'll start by saying one thing that I've seen, I feel like it's true of every organization, especially a school district, is communication can be a problem, right? So I'm just gonna read down my bullet points and some things that Doug and I talked about and some things that I'd love to do. So I know, I would love to try to survey the community, which it's great that I already forget, I'm so sorry that I forgot, the teacher's name this year.
Julia Anderson.
Julia, you said?
Yeah.
So that Julia brought up, about just a Google poll, right? So those are tools that I'm very familiar with. But I would love to survey the community, maybe start with parents and then maybe grow and cultivate an email list to include other members of the community. Doug had mentioned, that there are many individuals out there that would like to know what's going on in the schools. So like, for example, I now am privy to a lot of things going on in the Hartford School District, being on the board and being part of that giant email thread database, whatever you would like to call it.
Infinite campus.
Infinite Campus, there we go. So, before that, I only knew what was going on at OQS, being a parent. And before that, I had no idea what was going on in the Hartford School District, short of what was in the Valley News. And the Valley News, I would only see it work because we don't have it at home, right? And I don't pay for a subscription. So I felt that, or we feel that like, surveying the community, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, doesn't have to be a 30-question survey, but 1 to 2 questions. Asking the pulse on a topic. It doesn't have to be an official vote, it doesn't have to sway us in one way or another, but it's a way to get information and try to quickly engage people. Because one thing, I know a whole lot of parents that don't tune in to school board meetings. They don't show up to school board meetings because of the time. They don't go to the public libraries and see warnings very often, right? There's small members of our community that do those things or get their information that way. And I'm not saying that we should stop doing those things. I just think we should expand upon what we're doing. And so really this would be kind of a trial to see if we can drum up, I guess it'd be an expanded version of public comment. Right? And of course, I'm not looking to go rogue and just start asking questions of the entire community, but, cultivate a list of things that we would like to poll the community on weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. And whether it could be me that sends that out, or Tom, or there's somebody else, like our PR person could do that. But that's a way that we could collect real data consistently and also give people a platform to speak and share their opinion on things. So, and I know that we go over a lot of things, but we don't have to ask all of them, you know, we 1 to 2. So that's one big one that I feel like is kind of low hanging fruit, be really easy to deploy that. I'm not looking to spend any money. We could easily use, we all have access to create a Google form. I created 3 Google forms at my job today. So we could easily do that and it wouldn't take a lot of time to hopefully make the community feel like they're more engaged. So another one is focus on building up our social media presence. So Doug and I had talked about, you know, if you jump on Facebook and go to like any Upper Valley group, it's the Wild West. People are misinformed or they're asking legitimate questions and then they're getting ridiculous answers. And, you know, maybe they're getting one correct answer, right? Like, so Doug, when you went on, right, and you saw what's going on, you know, you can only answer so many questions out there in cyberspace and all of these different Upper Valley groups. There's countless that exist. But we have a Hartford School District board page and a Hartford School District page. So I feel like we need to cultivate either one of those or both of those and make that like the one-stop shop for people to go and find real information about Hartford. So whether that be our golf team came in first, or our basketball team came in second, or football team won the state championship. Of course, that stuff's gonna go into the Valley News. It's gonna go into our other communication channels. It's gonna go into emails. But I feel like we should pick a social media. I say Facebook because a lot of people I know use Facebook and engage with those chat rooms, whatever you would like to call them, I guess, the technical term. But I think we should pick one and do it well. Not try to do Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Etsy. Like, I don't think we should try to hit all of them, pick one, do it well. And that way people know they can go there regularly to get consistent information. That's a bigger one. That requires a social media manager or somebody who would like to take on some of that. But I think that would help solve, I don't even want to say problems, but I feel like it would help answer a lot of questions that people have regularly. And it might help bolster kind of a better community and get away from misinformation about things, especially like, again, Facebook was the wild, wild west during the whole bond and budget discussion. And if you went on there, I'd recommend just log off, you know, during that time, because of all the things that were being said that had no backing, or just things that did have backing, but people were really passionate about, and then everybody gets behind them. But to be able to steer people to something that is consistent and accurate would be great. Another one, bigger one, that I'm happy to help work on is revamp the website. I know that right now, Tom, for the most part, you're doing most of the edits and putting information out there.
Tests and Jonathan and all.
Yeah, so what I've heard from the community, just in my short time on the board, is that it can be tough for people to find things. It doesn't mean the information's not there, but it means that, you know, we may want to reorganize it or pick a different platform. Again, we don't have to spend a ton of money. We can make a Google site. We already use Google throughout the district. We have all of our information stored in Google Drive. We could make a Google site. It would take some time because there's so much information there, but we can do it pretty low cost. And I think that it will better serve the community. That's one that's not gonna happen overnight. You know, that's something that, you know, hopefully I could help get it done before my term ends. Kind of thing, because it can take a lot to put together a site. But it's something we could do. I'm happy to.
Well, one of my questions, Garrett, I think they're all good ideas, but is this a discussion item for another meeting, or
Probably.
we probably should discuss some of them? 'Cause some of them, you know, great, some of them are like, there's people in the district to work on it. If that's, you know, what the board wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if everybody'd like to.
Some
that-
of it,
that was my
you know,
last
there's
bullet
a
point.
few, like, you know, you just need to be a little careful around surveys. If
Yep.
you're, you know, you don't wanna be having a board meeting on Google Form, you know, like you have
And I'm
to
not
just
saying
kinda like.
either.
Yeah.
I'm saying we ask
Yeah.
one question, how people feel about it, a certain issue. Or,
Right.
just, again, give them a platform. The other thing about a survey or. a form
Even
that
just
goes
get their
directly to
email
us.
so we can communicate with them.
Exactly, and I think that's been even a bigger one, is kind of cultivate.
Well, John Haverstock and I have talked about just trying to figure out a way to create a Hartford email list.
Create a Hartford School District.
So,
listserv.
small school town, so that, we always talk about getting to school people. They can't get to school people, we can't get to town people. So we're kind of like, how do we create one big list, whether it's.
We don't want to start deciding things that haven't been warned that they're gonna be on the
Yeah,
agenda.
so we.
I think this was a great introduction of
Yeah.
the issues,
That was my goal.
and that you worked with Tom to put these on the next meeting agenda. And
Yeah.
I think it'd be great.
Well, I talked a lot, but Doug, did you want to add anything else, or were those were a lot of the things that we had talked about, so.
One comment, consider a kudos day, right? A day that like every Monday we do a celebration of something.
Okay.
Because that's one of the big things that we heard during the budget stuff is like, if you guys are doing awesome stuff, why don't you ever tell us?
Yeah.
And so if it's even if it's a regular thing, right? Like
Yes.
Throwback Thursday, whatever that
Yeah, like
is.
every day is a scheduled event. I mean, some kind of
Yeah.
a basic marketing calendar, if you will, on your social media calendar, so.
Yeah, well, social media is a conversation for another board meeting.
Sure.
Not social media, but, PR,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, I mean, I felt like all of those
Been
fell under the community
concerns,
outreach.
I just want to talk to them for a bit,
Sure.
yeah, so.
I look forward to being educated, because it's an area I know nothing about, and quite frankly, don't really wish to engage in. But
So I
nonetheless,
honestly very much dislike social media. I mean, the public can know that, that's
Yeah.
fine. But,
Yeah.
but I understand that it can be a great tool when,
Yeah.
used for good to get information out there, so.
But we'll talk about it in another meeting, but Nancy and I had a meeting today just about the Facebook page. We've got duplicating Facebook pages, we just gotta focus and have one and do it well.
Yeah. See, we were all on the same page.
Yeah, we're all on the same.
Great
page.
minds.
Yes,
Great minds.
so thank you for hearing all of that.
Yeah, thank
Well,
you.
that's now part of the charter as appropriate means of communicating official business.
Right, so did I?
Remember that was added to the
Start to the
charter.
training?
But even posting our board agendas and minutes there on the school board Facebook page or the school district Facebook page might drum up more participation.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to look at the Google Analytics for our site, just to see, well, if we can get any basic demographic data of who's going there.
Well, we can also add that, we change it up, we can do that. If I'm on another organization that does that, we're constantly reviewing.
Yeah, I mean, we
The
can,
analytics of like. Who went on our website, how long did they stay, what did they look at,
yeah.
What are they doing?
What pages are they? clicking on? What links are they clicking
how
on?
long did they stay in the website?
See, that's all in my wheelhouse, so I'm happy to help with any of that.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Cool, very good, thank you.
You can
Committee reports.
put this under PR. It's a public relations information. I was talking to Kevin early this morning. So after I hung up, I decided I'd find out for myself. I called Twin Pines. There are 5 leases signed already. All 5 have children. They could not tell me the age,
Right.
but he also told me that in about 2 weeks, they're expecting like 20 to 30 more signed. And he said, and at that point in time, we'll be able to give you a better idea exactly of what we're talking about. And so I left him my email and my telephone number and asked him that as soon as that was done, would they please let me know? Because I said, obviously it has implications that with the budget reductions that we've done, we potentially going to be doing some scrambling.
Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, John Haverstock and I met last week and we're talking about a joint meeting agenda. And one of the things on it is impact fees. So that we can,
So, Tom,
we can get some benefit from.
who do you have to go talk to to get us back on the planning process so that this doesn't happen anymore?
Probably Lori. Hirschbaum.
Yeah.
Yeah. She usually tells me that. She's pretty good to me, but it's just since there's no impact fees.
Well, what do we do to change that?
Yeah,
Well, we bring it up.
Yeah, we need to bring it up in the next meeting
Yeah.
cycle. So I think everyone would be supportive of it. They had them the first 3 or 4 years I was here.
Yeah, I was here when we
Yeah.
got rid of them, and at the time it made sense, given there was no economic activity at all. And anything that would move it, but now we have more activity than we can deal with, and we need to be able to respond.
I could report out
Yeah.
on a little bit about that at the next meeting.
Right.
But I was gonna put the joint, meeting agenda that we've already developed on the agenda for next time.
Yeah.
But originally, tonight's meeting was supposed to be sort of short, but
Yeah, it's getting late.
yeah.
We had dinner, so we were able to power through.
Nothing to report.
Sandwiches.
We haven't met, so,
We do have some, appointments, resignations and, 1 part of minutes. You ready to move to that?
Sure.
Alright. This is the time of year, you know, people were supposed to return their contracts, middle of last week. So you always end up with a bunch of resignations, nothing to get alarmed about, it's just a normal sort of turnover, so. Alexander Keeley, a special educator at Ottawa School, Maureen Marquis, these are all resignations, 5th grade at DBS for next year. Erica Young, special educator at White River School. Shannon Stacy, a math teacher at the middle school. Tora Lee Fisher Sass is a special educator at the high school. Sheila Halnon is a speech and language pathologist. Michael Finley is English teacher at the high school. And Julia Waswell is a music teacher at Ottawa. So those are all resignations. And then there's one set of minutes from last meeting.
I move that we accept the consent agenda and extend our thanks to those who are leaving.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Next board meeting is the 22nd of May,
Yeah,
correct?
back at the tech center.
Back at the best room,
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Would you like to do the meeting? You knew I was gonna ask that.
Yes. I borrowed the pen.
You sure can.
All right. The board was prepared for the meeting. Yes, satisfactory. Board was spent on ends not means satisfactory. Each board member was given opportunity to participate. Satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness. Satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order as appropriate as or necessary. Satisfactory. Board adhered to its governance style in that it emphasized outward vision and encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained the distinction between board and staff roles, as was discussed earlier. It used collective decision making and looked to the future. Satisfactory. With that, I move we adjourn.
Does it require a second? You're adjourned.
All right.
Good, I like this idea.